In progress.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark DeLuzio. I am the CEO and president of Lean Horizons Consulting. This is a free webinar on what we call strategy deployment, and I'll explain a little bit more about what it is and, of course, all the different names that are given to it, including this one. But I'm glad to be here. Glad to see a lot of international friends out there today, which is great. And let's get going, okay? Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the introduction. How did strategy deployment become so important to Danaher as we created the Danaher Business System? Now, this is not a presentation on Danaher, but I want to try to use this story to impress upon the fact that it was such an important milestone in the creation of the Danaher Business System. So I want to make sure that we understand how it plays a role and still plays a role. You know, it's going on 30 years now since we put that into the framework of DBS. We'll talk briefly about what it is, why use it, a little bit about the mechanics. Not going to get too much into the mechanics right now because I think the thought process of strategy deployment is probably more important than the mechanics, believe it or not, although the mechanics are very important. So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about some common pitfalls along with some success factors, because there's a lot of misnotion out there today, if you will, with what this really is all about. And I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about that as we go through. Talk a little bit about the Lean Horizons process, a little bit about our company, a couple slides on that. And then I'm going to open it up to questions and answers for everybody to opine. And you can always, email me later or call me later to have specific discussions about your company if you don't want to bring it up in public. So anyway, let's get going. Okay, well, a little bit of history on Danaher. Now, back in 1987, I was lucky enough to be hired at this company called Jake Brake in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And arguably, you could say that the modern lean movement in the United States started there. And that really is where the Danaher Business System, if you will, got its initial spark, although we didn't know it at the time. So I was hired by George Koenigsegger and Art Byrne, two of the foremost lean thinkers on the planet, along with Bob Pentland, who I still say, if it wasn't for Bob, Jake Brake wouldn't have done what it did, even though we had some great, unbelievable leaders in Art and George. Bob was the guy that really made it happen. He was a very good mentor to me and taught me an awful lot of what I know today. I still refer back to the stories that he's told me. So I was lucky enough to have been there. At the time, I took a finance role. I was the head of cost accounting, and we'll get more into that a little bit later. During this time, Jake Brake was in dire straits. I'll show you some slides in a minute, and some numbers in a minute. And we had to do something different. So George and Bob and Art, they were all really learning about the Toyota production system. And, we were the first ones to bring Shingijutsu into the US. And they started their first Kaizen the night that George and Bob met them. They brought them back to the plant, and at midnight, they were moving their first pieces of equipment, which is kind of a interesting story in and of itself. So over this time period, over the next couple of years, 87 to 89, we converted to from batch and queue to pull production and some flow production as well. Created cells, created value streams, and all that. And by the way, the first 10 years of the Danaher Business System, we never used value stream mapping. It wasn't until late 90s where we introduced that. So I'm not trying to say value stream mapping is not necessary, but I will tell you that we made unbelievable progress without using the value stream mapping process. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just making that comment. Matter of fact, Clem Confessori, who's on the line right now, is the one that introduced it to Danaher through the Lean Enterprise Institute, and Clem worked for me in the DBS office. So just a side comment, that's all. But we lost 33% of our business overnight. Cummins Engine Company just took all their product away once our patent expired. And the rest of the OEMs basically said, hey, you have to give us a 30% price reduction. So think about that. A third of your business is gone overnight, and the rest of the business, you have to take the price down by 30%. That, to me, defined a crisis, and that's why we had to do what we did. We introduced strategy deployment at Jake Break early on, 1989. So after we got the initial stuff done in terms of, moving equipment, creating value streams, not to say that we're not even anywhere close to, you're never done, right? I mean, it's a continuous journey. However, we had to now, back then, all we had to do was look at something and it got better. That's how bad it was. So now we're saying to ourselves, well, we got to be more strategic as to how we point our resources from a Kaizen perspective, right? So that's where we started learning about strategy deployment. And quite frankly, at that time, we made a lot of mistakes with it, but it did help us, okay? And we started using it then, albeit making a lot of mistakes. And I'll try to talk about some of those mistakes as we go through later. And it helped us. It helped us focus a little bit. And I'm going to show you a Jake Break story later as to how we tied a specific Kaizen to our strategy. And that's really the key to this whole thing, right? I was asked in the early 90s, 1992, by our CEO, George Sherman, to work for him. And his marching orders to me was, do for Danaher what you did for Jake Break. That was it. And you can argue that's when the real Danaher Business System got born. So I headed up that. And by the way, it wasn't just me. It was all kinds of people that worked with me, great thought leaders, Clem Confessori being one of them, who's on the phone right on the call right now. So we had a lot of great people. We had people like Shankar Anat, who might be on this call. I don't know. We had some really great people that we all worked together to create, what we know today as the Danaher Business System. Well, it made sense now to bring in strategy deployment. And that took the Danaher Business System from a set of tools to a more strategic focus in terms of where we were going to point our efforts in all that. And you'll see a little bit more about that later. So our mission with DBS was not to create the greatest manufacturing company in the world. We wanted to create the greatest enterprise in the world. And there's a big difference. So that's how we thought about it. And that's why, as a matter of fact, the Danaher Business System was initially called the Danaher Production System. And we adopted the name Business System instead, because we knew it had to apply to the whole enterprise. We just didn't know how to do it at the time, but we kind of knew it had to happen that way, right? So our gut was telling us to call it a business system, but even though we were maybe ill-equipped at that time to really figure out what that meant. And today, I'm very proud to say that the process that we put in place in the early 90s is still being used today by Danaher. And by the way, Danaher, if you're confused, if you know Danaher at all, they call it policy deployment. I wanted to change that name early on when we brought the Japanese over to learn this, but I didn't want to upset the apple cart and confuse everybody. So I stuck with the name policy deployment. But when I started my consulting company 20 years ago, when I left Danaher, I called it strategy deployment. I think that's more indicative of what this really is, right? But they're still using it today. It's still a very important part of their process and their growth, and what have you. So that's a little bit of history, how that really helped us move from a tool-based approach to a more strategic approach. And I'll talk more about that as we move forward. This is a picture of the old Danaher Business System house. They don't use this anymore. The tools on the steps are just symbolic tools. There's a lot more tools there. And as a matter of fact, these aren't just manufactured. The Danaher Business System had all kinds of other tools in it too. It had, it had strategic planning. You look down below on the right, strap, that's our strategic planning process. We had—
Breaking up, Mark.
I'm sorry. Did you see I'm breaking up?
You're breaking up. Yeah.
I hear you fine.
All good here, Mark.
Yeah, all good here as well, Mark.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hardwired, so I should not be breaking up. But anyway, this became, again, HR tools, IT tools. It became talent management. It became growth tools and everything else. And again, if you're going to set up a business system in your company, you have to subject your business system to the Kaizen process, just like anything else. You can't just say it's static, and that's it. And this is what you got to use, because if it doesn't grow, you won't grow either. So that's something important to think about as you look at this. And of course, the stock performance has been historic. You can see, Danaher's returned some unbelievable results over the course of time. And Wall Street, and I did a lot of work with Wall Street while I was with Danaher, and we actually had Wall Street analysts come in and actually work in Kaizens. And we had them tell us, teach them how to look at a factory and have them tell us what's wrong with us. And how many people would do that, right? But Cliff Ransom, who's a good friend and colleague of mine at Ransom Research, who followed, I've known Cliff, I think I was part of his first Kaizen I had him in. He is kind of like the lean zealot of Wall Street. And he gives credit, and not only Cliff, but other analysts give credit to the Danaher Business System as a major factor, not the only factor, but the major factor as to Danaher's success. And again, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but just glance at the numbers and you can see what we did in 10 years, okay? Basically it's pretty remarkable what Jake Break was able to do. And all the numbers went in the right direction. Would you consider that world-class? I don't know, maybe not, depending on who you are. The quality at 500 ppm is not world-class. If you fly airplanes, that wouldn't be a good thing. But it's pretty remarkable. We basically, quadrupled the business with essentially the same headcount. And and you can see what we did with the profitability and lead time and inventory turns and everything else. So it works, right? It really does work. And by the way, this was a UAW factory, okay? Everybody says, you can't do it with a union. Yeah, you can do it with a union. That's proof right there that you can do it with a union. A lot of people like to use the excuses as to why they're different and why they can't do things. And if that's the mode you're in, then you will be found correct. Okay, so you will self-fulfill your paradigms. So anyway, quick numbers on Jake Break and what have you. So let's move off of Danaher for a minute and talk a little bit about what is strategy deployment. I'm going to start out by saying the first thing is, how many people, first of all, even have a strategy? Okay, and I'll talk more about strategy versus deployment a little bit later. But these studies came out, and a little bit dated, but they probably still hold true today. 71%, based on CFO magazine, 71% of executives understood the strategy. And that's kind of scary. But as you move down to the line associates, you can see how it goes down to roughly 3%. And maybe the people that they polled just guessed right. I don't know. But, no communication as to what the strategy of the business was at all as you move through the organization. And if you look at the right, you have this macro, what I kind of call, poster banner type strategy, where you've had these slogans that say that you're going to be world-class, and our strategy is to become world-class, and half the people don't even know what that means. As a matter of fact, I would never even entertain that argument about what world-class was, because it didn't matter. I just knew when somebody came to me and said, "Hey, Mark, what's world-class for inventory turns?" I don't know. Why would you want that answer? All I know, it's not you. So get back to work, right? And so you can get into these pedantic debates like we see on LinkedIn all the time, but it doesn't really matter. As a matter of fact, the only people who could really define whether or not you're world-class or not are your stakeholders. And who are those stakeholders? It's your employees, it's your customers, it's your shareholders, it's the environment. Toyota even talks about their competitors as being a stakeholder, which is kind of mind-boggling, but it's awesome how they think about it. Many people think strategy is their financial budget. Okay. Now this study with Hackett benchmarking said 27% had fully integrated strategies. That has not been my experience. That's way high from my experience, but maybe it's just the clientele I end up dealing with. But I was actually surprised to see 27%. I would have thought it was more like 5. But anyway, as you can see here, integrating your strategy is not something that's commonplace. And if you look at how strategy is done, it's looked at in most businesses as an event. Okay, it's not an event, it's a process that's ongoing. And strategy deployment helps inform your strategy as you move along. The plan, do, check, act process is one of those things that really help you inform a better strategy as you move into the future. All right, so I'll talk more about that as well. So it has many names. Okay, Danaher calls it policy deployment. It's known as strategy deployment, Hoshin Conry, Hoshin planning. Some people call it goal deployment, which I think is the most deplorable name for this thing at all. You do not deploy goals. I'm sorry, you don't. This is not MBO, management by objectives. Okay, and I'll explain the difference a little bit later. Goal deployment, we do not deploy goals, and we deploy processes that drive business objectives. So the goals of this are the what, and all the things that we work on are the hows, right? And of course, our targets are the how much by when. But you know, when I started seeing this come out into the marketplace, I said, my God, you know, that's just a total misunderstanding of what this is all about. Okay, so it's a disciplined process to achieve sustainable, profitable growth, right? So Hoshin Conry, direction, needle, control, logic, you know, those are kind of the translations, if you will, of the kanji characters as to what this really means. Typically, we look at this as a 3-year plan with 1-year components. Most companies do 3-year strategic plans, some do 5. Okay. Drives breakthrough performance levels. You know, what is breakthrough? Breakthrough is, first of all, one of the criteria is a whole list of criteria. I didn't provide it here, but you know, it's something we've never done before. It's something that will provide us a discernible competitive advantage in the marketplace. It's something that will make us almost untouchable, whether it's a technological breakthrough, a process breakthrough. You know, if I can go from 30 days lead time down to 3 days, and everybody else is messing around up in that 30-day period, I'm going to take share even with a commodity product. We had a company that we actually did that with. A commodity product took them down to 3 days lead time, and they tripled their volume just because they had better quality and better delivery. All right. And it was a commodity product. So, you know, what happens there is you take price off the table when you're selling a commodity and you have other things to sell, but you got to train your salespeople as to how to do that, right? Value selling. So, you know, when the salesperson goes in and says, well, geez, you know, you guys are $10 a unit and, you know, I'm getting it for $9.50. Yeah, but you're going to carry all this inventory. Okay. Because they're delivering at 30 days. We deliver in 3. Okay. And oh yeah, by the way, do you see our quality ratings? Okay. So you can take price to a degree in the commodity discussion off the table if you've got the performance, but you have to have the performance. All right. Because if you backtrack on it, then all bets are off. Right. So there's a number of criteria that we talk about with breakthrough. One of them is have we done it before? Because if we've done it before, then it's just implementation. Right. So there's a whole other set of criteria around that, but I think you get the idea. Right. Alignment of resources within the company, really key. Okay. The plan, do, check, act process, and I got my buddy here, Mr. Deming, Dr. Deming, and I'm going to talk a lot about him a little bit later. If you can't solve problems, then don't do this. Okay. And I'll make that point again later, but the plan, do, check, act process is crucial to this particular endeavor. It's crucial anyway, just in daily management and, you know, key performance indicators, but even more so for this. Specific action plans, it's a cross-functional endeavor, and it really helps communicate what the heck the company's trying to do, right? Now, deciding what you're not going to do is sometimes even more important than deciding what you are going to do. And that's key because, as I said on line, which one was it? Line 3 up there, we only have so many resources to throw at this stuff, right? So we still have to run the company. And if you are trying to spread yourself to do, you know, a lot of people like to come into their leadership and say, here's my list of 30 things that I'm doing. Look at me. You know, look how productive I am. Well, that would at Danaher at least get thrown right back and say, no, I want 3. I want you to work on 3 things. Okay, not 25. You can't do 25. Nobody could. Okay, so that's the thought process behind this. Really conscious. And when I facilitate this, I make leaders sign a document that say, this is what we're not going to work on this year, and make them sign it with blood almost, right? So it's really key to have that conversation. Okay, so one of the misnomers that's out there with strategy deployment is that it's strategic planning. It's not. It's a way to deploy your strategy, okay? Now, there's a whole set of thinking about what really makes a good strategic plan. And as a matter of fact, we at Danaher put together, you saw it on the house, it was at Strap. Actually, it was Larry Culp and me and I, we sat down, and Larry was getting really frustrated with his general managers because all these guys thought they were masters of industry and they knew how to do strategy, and most didn't. So he had an interesting saying. Larry said, the quality of the strategy is inversely related to the thickness of the book. Okay. So the guy that comes in with a 400-page strategy doesn't know what the hell he's doing, right? If you can't really tell me in a few pages what your story is, and if you look down below, what game are we playing and how are we going to win, right? What game are we playing and how are we going to win? If you can't walk away with a very concise understanding of that, then you haven't done a good job with strategy. So our strategy deployment, strategic planning process probably consisted of 20 pages. That's it. Okay. And so many people miss some of the very fundamentals of strategy 101, like SWOT analysis, competitive analysis, technology analysis, market share analysis, that type of thing. So we actually put it into a process that everybody followed, and it was one of the many things that we had under the umbrella of the Danaher Business System. But now we need to deploy it, and that's a whole different proposition. Okay, so strategy deployment is how we implement our strategy. Keep in mind, it is not strategic development. It's not strategic planning. It's strategic deployment of your strategy. Many people like to use strategy deployment to deploy their budgets. And many people are walking around. I'm sure there's people on the phone right now or on this call right now that are saying, our budgets are breakthrough. No, they're not. Your budgets are not breakthrough, okay? You may think they are, and they may be a tough thing to do, but we're going above and beyond budget. This is not a means to deploy your budget. So when we start looking at any kind of financial targets within strategy deployment, I make sure that they're above and beyond what we have baked into our financial plan. Otherwise, all we're doing is implementing a budget, and that is not breakthrough. I'm sorry, it's not breakthrough. Okay. So keep that in mind too, because this is one of the other things that we see all the time with the misuse of this particular process. I like to use analogies to real life. And so when I think about strategy deployment, I think about building a house, right? So what's the first thing? You don't go out and hire a plumber and an electrician and a carpenter when you want to build a house. The first thing you do is you hire an architect. And that architect really, to me, represents our strategic plan, right? So you've got the framework all kind of laid out what you're going to do. Now you got to get it done. So what do? You go out and hire a general contractor, right? So here's your general contractor. He, in this case, is going to take the architecture, the strategic plan, and start putting the plans in place to implement. And now you got to get down to tactics, okay? And so here you hire a skilled tradesman or tradesmen, if you will, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, whatever, to actually implement the general contractor's plan, right? And the strategic deployment. So think about that in this context. So lean tools, for example, everybody says, hey, what tool do you start with when you go do a lean transformation? Wrong question. First question is, what are you trying to do? What's your objective? What's your strategic plan saying you need to do? Is it growth? Is it quality? Is it lead time? Is it profitability? I don't know. It could be all those things, right? Is employee engagement, talent management? There could be all kinds of things that we kind of call out for, But just to start out with tools, to say, hey, let's go whack in a few Kaizens and do a couple tools. Well, it's like me going to the gym and just working on my right bicep all the time. I don't know. I may have a great bicep at the end of the day, but my whole body stinks because I haven't worked out, you know? And so keep this analogy in mind as you go through. So now we get into the details. When we developed this chart way back when, we try to put this together in terms of the Deming cycle. And here again is my friend, Dr. Deming, who I never had the opportunity to meet. I know maybe some on this call have. I did have an opportunity to work briefly with Dr. Duran, which was his cohort as well, but not Dr. Deming, unfortunately. He died much earlier, I believe, than Dr. Duran. But if you look at the blue, that's all planning, okay? And even though strategy is not part of the strategy deployment process, I should probably put that in a different color, but I'm gonna keep it as planning, because developing strategy, you can maybe argue this is a 6-step process, not a 7-step process. Developing strategy is not strategic deployment, but coming out of the strategy, we develop the breakthrough objectives. We develop what we call annual improvement priorities, which are process-based priorities that we have to evolve. So for example, one example of an AIP might be, we need to design and implement a talent management process. We need to design and implement a supplier certification program. We have to design and implement a world-class marketing program or distribution or whatever, right? It's always process-based, okay? And then the targets that measure the effectiveness of that particular process. And then of course the resources, and I'll talk more about resources in a minute. So all this evolves around this thing called catch ball, right? That's a Japanese term when kids are out in the backyard playing catch with a ball, they're throwing ideas back and forth. It's not consensus, by the way. Okay, a lot of people think, oh, we have to come to consensus. No, it's how we put our ideas on the table. And I'll borrow again from Dr. Deming, you know, in God we trust, all others bring data, right? So many people might have a lot of anecdotal notions about why a target needs to be X or an initiative needs to be Y. But if you can't bring data to the table and support yourself, then that's not good, right? This needs to be more of a fact-based type of thing. And so the catch ball has those discussions, right? I don't call them arguments, but they have those discussions. And quite frankly, catch ball really happens all the way through this whole process. It's more predominant there, the way I have it laid out, but it really happens all over the place. Now we're going to deploy the AIPs, which means we're going to go to a second level, and I only go to a second level, and then deploy those specific sub-processes down into the action, if you will. So in other words, if I'm going to design and implement a world-class new product development process, let's say that's my top level AIP, maybe on the second level, one of the sub-processes might be, I need to design and implement a world-class voice of the customer process, because that's part of the new product development process, right? There could be other
Breaking up,
components.
Mark.
Everybody think I'm okay, or is this just Clem?
You sound
All
good.
good.
Yeah, no,
I can hear you.
You're breaking up.
Okay,
Mark.
Mark.
Perfect.
All good.
All good here.
yeah, Clem, I think it's your end. So anyway, so we come down to the sub-processes. Now we need to figure out what targets we're going to use to actually measure those AIPs. Okay. And so it's important to understand that level of detail. Excuse me, I'm just jumping ahead here a little bit. Implementing AIPs, that's where we start doing the real tactical stuff. And this is where we start prioritizing our Kaizens. As a matter of fact, at this point, we might want to even prioritize our value streams that we're going to go after, right? because the value streams, it could be a new product development process. It could be a sales process. It could be a distribution process. It could be a particular manufacturing process within the company, right? Not all products, not all processes are created equal in that regard. So strategically, you might say, hey, look, we have to really, if I make ballpoint pens, well, maybe the emphasis is on felt tip markers, and that's where the market's going. So I'm going to put my growth resources, my Kaizen resources in felt tip markers. Okay. And subordinate the regular classical ballpoint pen. Not to say I'm not going to pay attention to it, but the real thrust needs to be on that particular value stream. Okay. Again, that's just probably a crazy example, but I just throw that out. So implementing right now, this is where we're going to align our resources in our lean efforts towards our strategy. And then we have a monthly review process. We have countermeasures. This is where the plan, do, check, act process comes in. So everybody probably here has heard of A3 countermeasures, right? On one sheet of paper, we do a countermeasure. And the reason we call it A3, if you're not familiar with it, is the Japanese use those big pieces of paper, maybe analogous here in the United States to the 11 by 17, but their paper size is called A3. So it got affectionately called an A3 countermeasure form. And this is where the crux of this thing is all about. So, and then of course there's an annual review process, what I'm not going to talk too much about right now. But where could the failure point be in your organization? I want you to think about that as you look at this, because many times we do a really great job, but we're not aligning ourselves. And so we have a lot of great Friday afternoon pizza parties celebrating great Kaizen events, but at the end of the day, nothing reads through to not only to the financials, but to the customer, right? So, I could tell you, hey, let's go in and 5S our mailroom and we can have a great event. It could be the best mailroom going, but it's not going to be tied to my strategy, right? So we have to be very careful as to what we work on and how you can't do everything, right? So you have to be very judgmental and selective as to how that's going to fit into your strategy deployment, all right? I'll talk more about the plan, do, check, act process in a minute, but that is a key thing to do. And I'll go as far as saying that, hey, look, if you can't develop a good problem solving culture, don't do this, because you'll become frustrated. Now, one of the things that you see out I see this on LinkedIn all the time. Everybody gets involved in strategy deployment. No, they don't. The janitor gets involved. No, he doesn't. She doesn't, right? That's not how this works. Not everybody gets to work on developing breakthrough processes. We need to run the company, which is what's called daily management down below. These are existing systems. And I like to basically say daily management is defined as, making the train run on time, right? The trains run on time. Like when you come in on Monday morning and, either if you're in accounting, you're processing invoices, you're closing the books, you're developing product and new product development, you're putting out parts in manufacturing. Whatever it is your function does is called daily management. Now, all those processes within those functions are subject to Kaizen and improvement, right? Except for you can't work on all those processes. You got to work on the key ones that are really going to drive your customers' satisfaction. So if I'm in accounts payable, who are my customers? Well, I could argue maybe my vendors are my customer. Okay. The departments that I pay the bills for are my customer. Payroll's pretty obvious. It's my employees who get their paycheck or direct deposit, right? So how do I make my safety, quality, delivery, and cost better to serve my customer, and that customer may be an internal customer? So daily management is all the stuff we do every day just to run the business. We've got to have a certain amount of players doing that, right? And but everybody gets involved in Kaizen in one way or the other. And maybe this graph doesn't show it, clear enough, but it's more representative. But Kaizen should be across every single function from the CEO on down, right? So a lot of CEOs will stand there and say, I really am committed to lean. And my next question would be, well, how many Kaizens were you on last year? Well, I kind of, support the team when they do their Kaizens, Okay, all right, I got it. So everybody's, up for that. And then it's typically the top, we want the top leadership of the company working on strategy deployment, which is what I call working on the business, right? With daily managers working in the business. So up on top, we're trying to build a better mousetrap. We're trying to build a better business on select processes that are game changers. Again, how we process mail in the mailroom is not a game changer. How we develop new product, yeah, game changer, right? If I can develop new product in 12 months instead of 48, that's a game changer, right? So that's what I want to work on. I want to take all my processes that I have in the business and select 3 or 4 of the key ones that are really going to be driving my strategy. Not every process is created equal. All right. So that's what you want top management. Now, a lot of companies come back and say, well, we just don't have time to do this. Why? Because you're firefighting, because your daily management systems are broken. You can't deliver on time. You got lousy quality. Customers are complaining. People aren't getting paid, whatever it is, right? And in a funny way, those daily management functions that are the most problematic to your customers become your breakthrough, okay? So, even though, what's breakthrough for one company might not be another for another. So if a company's delivering at, 99.9% on time delivery to request date, it's not a breakthrough for them as long as they can sustain it and they got the processes in place to do that. However, a company that's delivering at 40% on time delivery, that might be a breakthrough, okay? I would argue it is, all right? And that's something that we really got to look at as to what processes we need to affect to take that 40% to 100%, right? And so that's the thought process behind this. Now, I'll talk about growth in a minute, but you could probably resonate with this chart to say that a lot of firefighting lives down below in that lower quadrant, if you will, that lower third of the chart, and that's where it just sucks up resources. Now, if that persists, it's a respect for people issue, because you've got your employees working in chaos every single day. That's not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for the company. It's not good for your customer. It's not good for their families. It's not good for their safety. If you have a miserable day at work, and we could probably all be in that category at one point or another, it could affect how you drive home, lose concentration, you're frustrated, auto accidents. I mean, it has a lot of ramifications. Your whole family life. You have 2 or 3 kids, you come home, you're frustrated. When you walk in that door, everybody picks it up right away, okay? It doesn't matter what you have to say. It doesn't matter what kind of happy face you're trying to put on. People pick up the vibes, okay? As a matter of fact, I'm doing a webinar tomorrow with Anthony Casablanca on grief, on grief leadership. It's one of our monthly things that we're doing until November, through November. And we talk a lot about this kind of grief, if you will, and how it affects. And so one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest causes of grief is leaders allowing their people to continue to work in chaotic processes and not providing any relief or resources to help fix that, okay? So keep that in mind. This all ties back to RFP, okay? I'm sorry, I went backwards. So here's the way to think about it, right? Look at the left-hand side here, year 0. I've got a daily management process. Let's say it's a manufacturing process, a quality process, whatever. It's giving me a certain level of performance. Now, arguably, if I do nothing to that process in year 1, you could see down here that it stays about the same. I'll probably digress, but it stays about the same. Now I can perform Kaizen on that, which means continuous incremental improvements, right? And I might bring it up to a degree. That's typically what you want to stress your budget for, your financial plan. But on those processes that are mission critical, that's where we're talking breakthrough, okay? Because I'm focusing in on process and not just results. So think about this. It's results-oriented processes. It's not just get me the result, because that would be management by objectives. I remember learning in management by objectives in my MBA, and the guy that taught it was like one of the world leaders in MBO. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world since sliced bread. But what happens with MBO is once you set the target and you hit it, well, in the meantime, you compromised everything around you to get that target. Give me any one target, I'll get it for you. You may not like what I've done to get it, but I'll get it for you. I'll get my bonus. And then the next year I get a new MBO and that one goes away because I didn't put any processes in place to sustain it, right? So strategy deployment is about building repeatable, sustainable processes so that you're always, when you come in on Monday morning and turn on the lights, you're operating automatically at a breakthrough level, automatically, all right? You're not, it's not a big Herculean, effort to operate at that level. And that's where you get competitive advantage, right? And you're laughing all the way to the bank because your customers are looking at you saying, oh my God, how could they have done that? How could they provide this kind of service and this kind of quality and that kind of complexity? And internally, we're kind of laughing all the way to the bank because we put the processes in place to operate at that breakthrough performance. Now, don't rest on your laurels because, somebody else is going to catch up with you and all of a sudden what you're doing could become a commodity, right? So you got to continue to improve. That's why this chart shows the improvement all the way through. So you could see after the first year, at that breakthrough level, it's baked into my daily management now, okay? And then the process continues all the way through. So that's a real key to think about here in terms of how we look at this, and again, I like to use the John F. Kennedy saying, when we went to the moon, this has all the cool elements of a breakthrough. First of all, we didn't know how to do it. He had an objective and he had a timeline, by the way. He said by the end of this decade, we got it done, in a matter of 5 months, I think, before the deadline. And there was a kind of an important part of this where he said, return him to Earth safely. And sorry, ladies, at the time, he wasn't thinking about women going into space, but return him to Earth safely was kind of an important thing to say to get buy-in for the mission, okay? So I use this as an example of breakthrough, and it really was a good one. And by the way, so many other things, and for those of you that worked in this industry, came off of this breakthrough. And that's true of a lot of breakthroughs that, all kinds of different technologies came out of this, all kinds of different, endeavors came off of this program. So keep that in mind too, that breakthrough does promote more breakthrough as you go through. All right, case study, go back to Jake Break for a minute. After we kind of cleaned up the business to a degree, albeit we were not perfect, we were now in a position to grow, okay? So our strategy said, we're a very cyclical business with the North American truck market, and we wanted to go international. So we looked at Europe, we looked at Asia in our strategy, and we figured Asia's the better play because there's only 3 or 4 major OEMs over there, where Europe was very fragmented at the time, right? It still is, but it's not a criticism of Europe. It's just that's the way the market is. You got so many different players over there. Jake Break eventually went into Europe, but we first went into Asia. Well, who are the big players over there? It was Hino Motors, which is owned by Toyota. And when I became general manager, I took over that Asian business, and that they were my client. And so it was Mitsubishi. Those 2 big players that they went after first. And then there's Nissan and then Isuzu, right? So we targeted Hino and Mitsubishi. So our 3-year breakthrough objective was to achieve certain profitable revenue, X dollars, it doesn't matter what the dollars were at this point, in the Asian marketplace. Well, part of doing strategy deployment is benchmarking. And you got to benchmark what is world-class and what is your customer doing and what are they going to expect. And we looked at this and we said, well, geez, Hino and Mitsubishi are actually developing new engines in 18 months. We're developing a Jake Break that goes on the engine in 72 months. Guess what? There's our breakthrough, okay? So we went through and used all, and I'm only picking on one particular value stream of this whole thing. There were a lot of other things that had to happen, including putting the toll gate process in place, and Adis Jain, who was the VP of design and R&D and engineering, was the guy that, played a big role in developing what we call the Danaher development system, because everything that he did there, we kind of emulated in the DBS with toll gates and everything else, right? And anyway, so the value stream, in this case, we looked at the engine lab. We had a dynamometer that our brake would go on and then would have to run for 500 hours. Well, we had 15 to 20 projects stacked up on this one dyno, and it was taking them over 3 weeks to change it over. So we said, well, geez, let's use single minute exchange of dies, which is a lean tool, as you might know, to take the changeover down. And we took it down to 1 day, okay, which to me was still too long, but it's a big improvement. So we're able to put things through quicker. Now think about that. A lean tool that you typically would use in manufacturing, we use in an engine lab, and that ties you right back to your strategy. That to me is what I call Kaizen with a purpose, right? We didn't just do SMED because it was fashionable and we want to show some really cool results on Friday afternoon. We did it with a reason. We did it because we needed to drive that engine lab down. Otherwise, Hino and Mitsubishi never would have talked to us, okay? By the way, when we got down to 18 months, they were at 16. So just to let you know, they don't stand still either, okay? So, something interesting happened here, okay? One of the mistakes we made in the early days. So Adish Jain, my good friend, the vice president of engineering, our first project was Mitsubishi, and we got down to 18 months, right? And he came to me, and this is at the time I was CFO before I went into general management, and he said, "Mark, we're gonna hold a party for the Mitsubishi team at this hotel. We're gonna rent out a room and have a dinner and all that, just to celebrate the fact that we got to 18 months." I said, "Oh, well, that's great. Yeah, okay, I'm all for that. Yeah, but Mark, we're only gonna invite the people that were involved in the program." Okay, fine. I show up to the thing, and I couldn't believe half the company was there. So I said to Adish right at the party, I said, "Adish, I said, what's going on here?" I said, "I thought you said you only invite the Mitsubishi team." He says, "I did." "All these people worked on Mitsubishi?" "Yeah." Right there, I said to him, "Guess what? We don't have a process. All we did is throw resources at it. Okay. It wasn't sustainable, repeatable. And by the way, we were able to pull resources off these other 72-month programs because the US OEMs were so sloppy and so long that we had a lot of slack. A lot of times we were waiting for the OEM to get back to us on stuff, right? So it wasn't a process. So when we did Hino, we really took more time and attention to drive real true performance so that all new product development processes went in 18 months, not just, the one that we want to throw a bunch of resources to. So there is a case where we got fooled. We looked at the result and we're elated, euphoric with 18 months, but we really fooled ourselves to a degree, and we didn't really say, is it sustainable? Do we really have a process? We kind of did, but we kind of didn't, right? So that was a lesson for us to really think about a process-based approach with strategy deployment, not just a results-oriented approach. And that is a key thing to think about, okay? So that was a lot of fun being involved in all that. And by the way, I'm not trying to take anything away from Adish, because without Adish, we wouldn't have done this. And he is just an unbelievable individual too, personally and professionally. So so think about how you tie back your Kaizen efforts to your strategy, right? Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the mechanics because that's fodder for another day. But here are the key forms that we use. Okay, you've got the matrix. And I'm only showing one matrix up here, but I'm going to talk about architecture in a minute in terms of where you put these matrices. But and it's different for every company. Okay, but these are the key forms that we use. It's we plan with the matrix. We put the action plan together, and a lot of people say, "I know how to do action plans." Yeah, no, we have a whole set of rules about what an action plan is all about and how you do it, and then a bowling chart, which I have to take credit for naming because one of my claims to fame is I used to bowl in college. And we were sitting in the room. I don't know if it was George Koenigsegg or Art Byrne or whoever it was, but we're sitting there and I looked at this chart up on the wall. I go, that target sheet looks like a bowling scorecard. And somebody said, no. Bowling has 10 frames. And I said, well, not if you're good, because the 10th frame, you get 2 more shots if you get a strike in the first roll. So we started calling that a bowling chart. And for some reason, it got out into the marketplace and everybody started calling it a bowling chart. I don't know. But so that's what I'm most famous for, the bowling chart. And then the A3 countermeasure form as well, which is the act part, right? So the plan, do, check, act is resident in all these forms, okay? And I want to talk a little bit more about these forms in a minute. Now, by the way, there is also very specific, and we don't have time today for this, what makes a good breakthrough objective? What makes a good annual, what's a good format for a target? What about teams? How do you get the right team working on this, okay? It's very crucial because, and all that, like, is beyond the scope of this seminar today, but when you do strategy deployment, there's really 2 lenses that you have to look through. The first lens is a technical lens. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Knowing how the mechanics of all these forms work, how it cascades and all that good stuff, right? How to do a good A3, problem solving basics 101, how to put together a good action plan. What's the format of a good target? What's the format of a good breakthrough? That type of thing, right? So that's a technical side of this thing. The business side is another lens you have to look through. Now you have to challenge this from a business perspective if you're facilitating this. So for example, if your breakthrough objective is to grow your market share by 10%, but the market in itself is growing 20, well, right there by definition, you're going to plan on losing share. So if you're not able to bring that kind of thinking, that business thinking, understanding how all the functions relate, what the basics of business are, then, and if all you are is a tech, this is why I hate to say it, but like a young, inexperienced person can't do this very well because they don't have the business experience to challenge a CEO or whoever on the good word for it here, on the integrity of what they're putting down. So you can put down a breakthrough objective, a target that's all really well properly laid out according to the book on the technical side, but from a business perspective, it makes absolutely no sense at all. So that's why this is a hard process to facilitate, because you need both the technical understanding and the business understanding as you go through it. So you almost have to think about this with 2 sets of glasses when you facilitate this, okay? So, you know, I talk about the problem solving, right? And again, here are our forms again, and if you don't have a good problem solving culture, you know, to me, I go back and look at lean in general, and the more I've been doing this now, which is over 30 years, the more it's all about solving problems. Okay, everybody says, well, you know, how do you put a good standard work in place, or how do you do SMED, or yeah, all those are important, right? But ultimately, this is all about solving problems permanently. Now, my first visit to Toyota in Japan in 1990, one of many visits, an executive said to us, a senior executive, he said, all companies have problems. What makes a world-class company is their ability to solve problems. He said, and I remember he said this, he said, even the great Toyota has problems, but we only solve them once, okay? How many times have you guys solved problems and I'd do it again? Because all you did is put out the fire, handle the short-term countermeasures, but you didn't address the root cause of the problem, right? So he said, to be a world-class company, you've got to learn how to solve problems. And that really is the essence, I think, of what we're trying to do with this, right? And so this not only applies to strategy deployment, but it applies to daily management too, right? When you have problems in that regard. So everybody says, you know, well, you know, our principles are that we solve problems at the lowest possible level, highest necessary, lowest possible level in the organization. Well, that's all nice and good, Now I'm going to ask you, well, how you do that? What's your process? Do you have a process? Do you have a problem-solving process? No. Okay. Do you teach people? No. Do you give them time to solve problems? No. Well, then it's a slogan. That's just a BS slogan. Okay. And all you're doing is going to frustrate the heck out of people because you put out these grandiose principles, but you didn't back it up with a process. Okay. So values and principles without a process are merely slogans. Okay. Does your company have slogans? Right. So think about that. It's interesting because when I first went to Hino Motors in Japan, again, Hino's part of Toyota, right? I went to Hino City, and we were pretty cocky at Jake Break. We thought we were like, quite frankly, we were like, we led the way in lean in the U.S., but literally we were we were the tallest guys in the pygmy village, and we were only 3 feet tall, right? So everybody else was kind of behind us, but when we went to Hino, we had just put in a production, improvement system with our employees, and we were getting 2 suggestions per month per employee, right? And UAW shop, by the way, okay? And we were pretty proud of that. When I went to Hino, this is back in early 90s, they were tracking 9 suggestions per month per employee. Okay, you might say, wow, that's good, right? It's even better because it was 9 implemented suggestions per month per employee. Implemented, okay? So in our system at Jake Break, somebody could have put a suggestion in to paint the building pink, and we would have put it in as a suggestion and counted it, right? Then we asked, well, how'd you do that? Well, what they did was they gave their employees every week Friday afternoon. They took that time out of the available time when they calculated their tech time, and they said, okay, that Friday afternoon is when you work on problems. And the employees were able to bring over, they provided them what meant mechanical, engineering, maintenance, whatever, tool room support. 2 employees might want to improve a fixture, let's say, right? It was all under the guidance of engineering to make sure, principles weren't broken and safety was there and all that stuff. But they actually put their money where their mouth was, okay? So if you've got your employees working 50 hours a week putting out parts, and then you walk away saying, how come we're not solving problems at the lowest possible level? Well, look in the mirror, okay? Look in the mirror. You didn't provide the process. You don't have the training. You didn't give them the time or the resources to do it. So again, principles and values without a process are merely slogans. And that is very disrespectful, by the way, to a lot of people, okay? Not especially the employees. So think about that as you go through. You've got to develop the problem-solving culture in your business. And if you don't have a problem-solving training program, and by the way, you don't need 50 different tools to solve problems. The more I've done this, a Pareto, maybe a 5Y, sometimes a fishbone. A Pareto is probably one of the more powerful and deceivingly difficult. It's deceiving because it's not easy to really use a Pareto in the way it's supposed to be used. Everybody thinks they know how to use it, but how to think about using that is a very powerful tool. Matter of fact, when I worked with Dr. Duran, I asked him what his favorite quality tool was, and he said, it would have to be the Pareto diagram. He says he's not the one that brought it into the quality circles. So, he was kind of funny that way, but powerful, right? Learn how to solve problems. Okay. If anything, all the stuff you see on LinkedIn and everything, learn how to solve problems. Okay. And focus on quality and open up your mind to what quality is. It's not just product specifications. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Maybe I just threw this up here to glaze you over for a while here, but you've got to figure out the architecture for your business. Okay. And this is too in-depth right now to try to get to, but there is an architecture as to how you think about laying this out within the company. And every company is a little bit different, right? So you have to kind of look that through. But there is a line of sight all the way down to the plant levels to the corporate breakthrough objectives. But corporate is not dictating what those plants are going to do. Because let's say, for example, you want to improve lead time to go from 30 days to 2 days. which by the way is possible, then in one plan, it might be a quality play that's prohibiting them from hitting that lead time. In another plan, it might be a productivity or a supplier issue or whatever. So you don't want to dictate from above what your lower level, facilities and what have you are going to do. Okay, you don't want to do that because you don't know. And the further away you are from the problem, the less you're equipped, including CEOs and VPs, the less you're equipped to really understand what needs to be done at the lower level. So the further you can push this down into the organization and let them decide, you still have the ability to play catch ball at all these different levels. Okay. All right. Well, so when they present their matrix to you, there'll be a top level matrix, for example, at plant 2. When they present that, you can play catch ball. You can ask for the data. Well, why are you saying you're working on quality when, can you tell me about your supplier delivery and performance? Maybe that's the big issue. So you play catch ball that way, right? And make sure that their thinking is in concert with what you're trying to do strategically. Okay. But there's no cookie cutter approach. And I've seen one of the mistakes made that the corporate office dictates what everybody else. One particular client of mine, I tried to talk him out of it. He said, everybody's going to do value stream mapping this year. Oh, geez, to me, that's like saying, okay, well, everybody who's sick is going to go get x-rayed, but that's it, right? That's all we're going to do is x-ray you. Okay. So, but everybody's going to do, one other client I spoke with, I did a keynote speech for at their annual conference. The edict was everybody's going to do standard work. By the way, standard work is a good thing to do, but is that all you're going to do? Okay. And it's like taking one tool out of so many and saying, we're going to just be really good at that. So some people say, hey, we're going to start lean by doing 5S. No, that's not how you start lean. Okay. So anyway, problem solving, the architecture is very important. A lot to go into here, and I don't have really time to do that today, but it is something that you really have to think through up front before you start calibrating this through the organization. All right, let's talk about pitfalls. The most common pitfall I see is that people merge strategy deployment with daily management. So you've got senior executives talking about the productivity on some inane cell out in Tupelo somewhere, and it's like, that's not what we want the CEO to work on, right? We're talking about daily management. That stuff should be handled at the local level, right? We don't want you to talk about daily management. As a matter of fact, if you're going to use a bowling chart, so what I would say that every function comes up with their bowling chart in terms of safety, quality, delivery, and cost with their objectives and their Kaizen improvement plan going across. But that's different than strategy deployment. Strategy deployment has to be kept separate. Okay. So if you look at all the differences between the two here, strategy deployment and daily management, you can see there's a lot of differences here, right? So, I put a number down here on the third to the bottom line that says, roughly, I don't like percentages like this, but I used one anyway. 70% of your Kaizen activities should be tied back to your strategy deployment. Maybe it's 2/3. I don't know. Put it this way: a significant amount of your Kaizen focus should be on your breakthrough objectives, which is your strategic imperatives coming out of strategy deployment. Okay, but you still have to prioritize, right? Even on daily management, what are the really mission critical things we need to work on in that regard? But don't confuse it. This is a big deal, and it happens all the time. And as a matter of fact, I'm one of those people that made this mistake, okay, in the early days. So don't do this, all right? I get people calling me up saying, hey, we want to use that matrix, man. We really want to get that matrix going. We want to put the X matrix in place. Thinking that the X matrix is a holy grail, right? Like, all I got to do is get that matrix plugged into the wall socket, and then everything else is going to be great, right? Wrong, right? Wrong. It's not magic. All that is a form. It's not about, if you filled out an X matrix, you know what you did? You created a lot of nice wallpaper, okay? And here's my lady over here holding all this nice wallpaper, but you've done nothing. It's part of the planning process on PDCA, right? you've done nothing. And I'll tell you, can't tell you how many people I've seen go and spend the time with their team, putting together the matrix. As a matter of fact, just to let you know, when I facilitate this, I don't even use the matrix. I use white. I don't want them to be encumbered. Something about this matrix mesmerizes people, and they glaze. I think it's hypnotic or something. I don't know what it is. You know, you got to turn your head sideways. You got to learn how to use it. I've been doing it for 30 years, so it's easy for me to read it. But when you first see it, it mesmerizes people, and they become hypnotized, and they think it's all about the form. So when I facilitate these sessions, I don't even use the form. We fill the form out later. Okay, I want you to think. I don't want you to worry about filling in boxes. Okay, that's not the game. So be careful with the X matrix. All right, but I've seen companies come through and say, okay, well, you know, they go through all the efforts of meetings and facilitation and workshops, and they fill out the X matrix, and they sit back, and the CEO will sit back and say, this is great. I think we're all set. What do you mean you're all set? Yeah. Then, and they do nothing else. Well, now think about the employees that are basking in a sea of chaos because their business is so screwed up. And all of a sudden you bring this thing in and you say, hey, look, we've got a slight sliver of hope here that we can fix your world so that when you come in every day, things go right, right? And we're going to bring you to a competitive advantage, and you're going to make a lot of money, which, by the way, is good for everybody. And you're going to be a proud company, and you're going to, you know, work on the business and really grow instead of fighting fires all day. Okay, so you bring this in, you bring somebody like ourselves in as consultants, and they say, oh, we got the matrix done. Don't even go to a second level. We got the matrix done. Yeah, we're good. Okay, and that's it. Very disrespectful, because the employees are sitting there with a hope. It's kind of like bringing a little puppy home to a child, and a kid falls in love immediately with the puppy. And then he says, okay, well, Johnny, sorry, puppy's got to go back to the pen, right? And he takes puppy away. It's the same thing. You can't do that to your people, okay? So if you're going to do this, make sure you're committed to doing all of it, the whole PDCA cycle, and putting the time and effort to developing that problem-solving culture. It's very disrespectful when this happens, okay? So word of caution, it's not about the forms. It's not about the matrix, okay? Those are great tools to use. It's about your thinking process and your commitment to making things better, all right? Another error I see is that people want to deploy this on a functional basis, okay? Finance has their objectives. Engineering has, well, guess what? One of the requirements of breakthrough is that it's a multifunctional game. I've never, ever seen a true breakthrough that was just specific to a function. Even if it's a new product development process, do you think that was just an engineering play? Do you think that sales didn't get involved in that, and marketing, finance, HR? I mean, come on, you know, IT. I mean, everybody got involved in that. It's a multifunctional play. So you got to think about your strategy deployment as you seed your teams on the matrix to a multifunctional, cross-functional endeavor. Okay, now it may be that one particular initiative or AIP, annual improvement priority, might have more of an engineering twist to it, or maybe more of a commercial twist to it. It doesn't mean that it's only commercial people on the team, or HR, or in this, you know, or manufacturing. You've got to have this be multifunctional. Okay, and if you can't see your breakthroughs as being a multifunctional endeavor, it's probably not a breakthrough, okay? Or you're not thinking about it the right way, all right? Because it's not functional. I did have a big client that, you know, I couldn't convince the president and COO not to do it functionally. And a couple of years ago, the new CEO, it's a big company, $18 billion company, the new CEO and the president and COO got me on a call, and we started talking about this. And hey, Mark, we're really having problems with these functional deployments. I go, don't do them. And I told your predecessor about this, but he disagreed. Don't do them, okay? And I will guarantee you, if you try to create the best function, you will suboptimize your enterprise. Okay, if you try to create the best engineering function, the best IT, by the way, I don't have all the functions listed here, okay? Just to let you know. I know there's more functions than just the ones I have showing. But if you try to create the best sales function, you will sub-optimize your enterprise, okay? This is not about creating the best functions. This is about creating the best business, the best enterprise, all right? That's why one of the key reasons why it's got to be cross-functional, okay? Typically, and this has kind of been our experience with acquisitions when we integrated acquisitions at Danaher, typically the beginning of this, and every business might be a little bit different, right? You start out with operations, safety, quality, delivery, and cost, SQDC, right? And you look at this and you say, okay, well, you know, we can't grow right now. I'll give you a case study. George Sherman and I, our CEO of Danaher, we'd go out to all the strategic planning meetings every year. We went out to this one particular business out in San Jose, flew out there, and the general manager of that business started reporting and started showing his strategy and how he was going to enter the European and Asian market. George stopped him in his tracks and said, John, your quality and lead times are abysmal. I am not going to let you screw up Europe and Asia like you're screwing up North America. Fix your quality, fix your delivery. Don't put $1 into growth. I'll be back in a year. Okay. That was it. Okay. So off of that meeting came up with the idea, hey, you've got to earn your right to grow. You can't grow if you're in chaos. If you've got lousy quality, delivery, safety, whatever, your operating metrics are a mess. And that was Jake Break's issue. We couldn't grow back then until the first couple of years where we fixed a lot of things and got things at least decent, not great, but decent, right? So then you gravitate in maybe more of a hybrid approach where you can start doing some growth stuff, but you're still working on those operations. And eventually you go into just pure profitable growth. Now, does that mean you don't work, you know, in the later years, you don't work on operations? Absolutely not. That's not what this is really saying. Maybe it's showing it that way, but it's saying to yourself, okay, well, you know, because maybe your operations are doing something right now where you get outplaced by a competitor. And you end up with, you know, having another breakthrough in operations. Okay. But think about this. Don't try to go out and just grow your business when you're ill-equipped to even supply your current customer base, right? You must earn the right to grow. If that makes any sense. This is a representative timeline. May or may not apply to you. This happens to be a fiscal year, calendar year company. But typically we would start looking at strategy from May through September, developing that strategy. Now, if you already have a strategy in place, okay, all it is just an update. It shouldn't take a lot of time. And you shouldn't think about strategy as an event. You should think about it as an ongoing process. By the way, your strategy gets informed along the way as you're executing strategy deployment, okay? So think about that. And again, I like to think about this again, another analogy. If I'm going to send a rocket ship to the moon, do you think those guys just walked away in Houston for 3 days and didn't monitor the course of that rocket, the Apollo? No, they made mid-course corrections all the way through. That's PDCA, that's countermeasures, right? They made the mid-course corrections to make sure they were going to hit their target, which in this case was the moon. So as you go through this, you learn and you say to yourself, well, you know, geez, we didn't anticipate this problem. We didn't see this and we didn't see that. The next Apollo we set up have to incorporate that new thinking, right? That's what I mean by evolving your strategy. So a strategy cannot be viewed as an event, strategic planning, I should say, not as an event. It's an ongoing thing that you're working on and addressing. It's not just, hey, you know, boss is coming in September and we got to present it. And then I actually had one guy one time at one division. I stayed after, you know, George Sherman came in and, you know, he takes the book and he puts it in his bookcase, the strategic plan, and he actually says, the company president, by the way, he says, glad that's over. Now we can get back to work. Are you kidding me? I mean, that is your work. What are you talking about? You know, so this is in the early days, you know, but it's not an event, right? It's not a financial exercise either. we made sure our strategic planning was, yeah, we had a financial statement in the back of the thing, but it wasn't all about financial exercise right now. It's strategic. What game are we playing and how are we going to win, right? And again, I made this point earlier. Strategy deployment is designed to implement your strategy, not your financial plan. Okay. And you've got to be ready to go on the first of the year if this is your calendar. Okay. You can't wait till December to start thinking about this. So you got to put this into a timeline and a cadence. All right. You might even want to pull back the strategy deployment to earlier months. I don't know. But as you get better at this, you're going to find that it's not a big effort to set it all up because you're just updating as you move through. Right. And that's part of that annual review that I talked about on the 7-step process that I told you I wasn't going to talk too much about right now. But so that's, you got to think about it. How does this fit into your cadence of your business planning? Right. This happened to be what we looked at Danaher. Could be different for you, but that was the thought process. Okay. I'm not going to go through any of these. These are here really more for your benefit. I talked a lot about these already, but just a list of some pitfalls. I don't want to put them all on one list. It's not really meant for a really good presentation at this point. One of the things I've seen though is the strategy deployment process actually fell down because we couldn't administer it. A million different spreadsheets and Excel spreadsheets and version control and all kinds of confusion and chaos. So we did start out by using matrices on Excel and all that. And we try to automate them and all that good stuff, right? And we came across a group of people called Changeway, John Armstrong and Travis Schultz out of, John Armstrong is out of Scotland, which is one of my favorite countries, by the way. I've been to 45 and that's one of my top ones. I do like single malt scotch, so, and golfed over there many times. So, but anyway, Changeway has this program that we looked into, and these guys are lean guys. These guys work in the lean space for quite some time, so they get our lingo and our thought process. So I won't say we partnered with them, but we don't have any kind of business relationship with them, but we recommend them to our clients who are embarking on strategy deployment, and they've got other tools in their software and the Changeway software that facilitates, daily management, KPIs, project management, stuff like that. So I've got a slide on the end of this to kind of just show you. And if you're interested in contacting them, again, we have no commercial agreement. I just like to recommend people to my clients, like I do Jake Stiles, who's out of Stiles Associates, who I think is one of the best lean recruiters out there. I like to recommend these so-called partners, if you will, to my clients, because I think it's going to help my clients, right? So that's why they're there, and I'll show you that in a minute. But by the way, the administration is a big deal, and it could be a downfall for you if you don't get that squared away. And I think the Changeway process makes it 1,000 times easier as we go through. Success factors, okay. I would say probably the biggest success factor out of all of this is how to do a good review. In addition to all the other things I talked about in terms of problem solving and what have you, leadership needs to understand how to ask the right questions as opposed to giving the answer. Because again, the higher you are in the organization, it's inversely related to the quality of your advice from the problem, okay? Problem solving, the quality of problem solving gets better as you move down closer to the problem, all right? So, matter of fact, my friend John Shook, who worked with Numi and has done some great things with the Lean Enterprise Institute, John told me once that at Toyota, they did not allow an executive to opine on a problem unless they observed the problem firsthand. Can you imagine how many meetings you don't have to go to anymore if that was the case, right? Pretty cool, I think, right? Because what they're really saying is you can't just sit there and opine on what you think it is if you haven't even observed the issue, right? So leadership needs to know how to ask the right questions, okay? And keep it focused on processes, not on just the results, okay? And you've got to invest in training. You've got to invest in your people. I'm sorry, you got to give them the tools, the training, not only with this process, but other things as well for them to be successful, right? Okay, real quick, I'm going to talk about Lean Horizons in a minute. So this is kind of the way we implement it when we work with a client. All right, we have a leadership workshop. We develop the top level matrix. There's a whole session involved in that. Then we get into the second level. We complete the action plans. We go into bowling charts. There's a whole science on that too, is how you do that correctly. And then we get into the problem solving, task 5, which is root cause problem solving. And then how do you hold that good review meeting, which is task 6. Depending on how aggressive you want to be, this could be a 2-month process, could be a 6-month process. It all depends on how quickly you want to go. Okay, so which is one of the reasons we're doing this, now in July, because it's getting into the season where a lot of calendar year companies are going to think about doing this, right? So, okay. Lean Horizons, again, we don't only offer, we're global, as you can see, but we don't only offer Kaizen. We're very good at Kaizen, don't get me wrong, but we're not just about Kaizen. We know how to do transformations. And part of doing transformation is, how do you set up your lean office? How do you really drive this through the leadership? How do you make sure leaders really understand principles? Because I don't care what you say, like a lot of banter on LinkedIn about, standard work doesn't apply to our business. Tack time doesn't apply to us. Okay, great. The principles apply everywhere. I don't care what business you're in, healthcare, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, it doesn't matter to me, right? Insurance, the principles are the same. Lemonade stand, yeah, same principles, okay? Tools might be different because depending on the nature of your business, some may play heavier than others, right? But the principles don't change. So we know how to do that, and we know how to, we've all, worked on successful transformations, not just, whacking in a couple of good Kaizen. That's one of the problems today, is that a lot of companies hire what I call Kaizen jockeys, guys that know how to go out and do really good Kaizens, and then ask for their opinion on how to transform the company. Totally different. It's kind of like asking a chef how to run a restaurant. What do they know about running a restaurant, right? So that's what we bring to the party as far as how to do this. And I will say that I get a lot of calls that say, hey, we want to do the Danaher Business System. And the first thing I'll say is, no, you can't. It only works for them. You've got to develop your own process, your own way of thinking, and match it to your culture. There's not to say that there's things that you can't take out of DBS or Toyota or anybody, Nissan or anybody else, to adopt into your framework, but it's got to be your own, right? But quite frankly, a lot of people who do call aren't willing to do the work. And what they're really telling me is, we want Danaher's results, okay? They're not saying they really want to do the work and not willing to change themselves, because what got them to that role of prominence in their organization are sometimes very traditional things. And now you're coming in saying, well, guess what? Those traditional things don't work, right? Those traditional things aren't going to get you to where you say you want to be. And it's sometimes hard for a CEO or a senior leader to abandon what they used to do that got them there, because there's some risk involved, right? And why am I going to risk that if I'm, 58 years old, going to retire in a few years? Why am I going to risk my future with change, right? So this is one of the reasons why a lot of this doesn't work, where transformations start, but then the senior leaders just don't want to change themselves, but they expect everybody else in the organization to change, and that's not good, right? That's disrespectful. Okay, Art Byrne will tell you this better than I can, and he says it all the time. Art says everybody's job must change. If you're going to do a transformation, everybody's job must change, including the CEO. Okay. We have a lineage back to the teachings of Ono, okay, through the people that we were mentored by. And these are not our clients on the right. These are some of the companies that the people within Lean Horizons have worked in and worked in some semblance of transformations, okay? And this is just a few of the companies I put up there. To be honest with you, I didn't do any kind of transformation at Lego. I worked at Lego back in the 80s, and I just put that up there because everybody knows Lego, and it's kind of cool. And probably people have broken their feet on stepping on Lego over the years, but they did some cool things back then. Even though back then they were a batch and queue company, They said some really cool things on Lego. How many people here ever bought a Lego set and it was missing a piece? There's a reason for that. I won't go into it now, but there's a reason for that. So anyway, some of the companies that we all work for, Davey Thompson worked, of course, with Rolls-Royce and Nissan. Davey was part of bringing Lean to Europe. Nissan beat Toyota here at Europe, believe it or not. Just want to let you know that Davey, if you see me talking with him on LinkedIn, he will be joining Lean Horizons. I didn't put the announcement out yet, or maybe this is part of it, but Davey will be joining us as a managing director for Lean Horizons. And then we've got Kevin Mathis with HNI and Han. Kevin and I worked together the early days at Danaher. We got Clem working. Clem Confersori worked in like 5,000 different industries, a couple of which are on here right now. And Joe Rutz, who worked with me at Danaher, and we did a lot of transformations there and integrations, has also some great pharmaceutical experience, including Alvogen, which is located down on the bottom. So anyway, a lot of great transformational experience. And I would probably say what's best about the group within Lean Horizons is that we made a boatload of mistakes, okay? And that's one of the reasons you should be thinking about talking to us, because we've done that and we don't want you to do the same thing. Here's a quick blurb on Changeway. I know it's a kind of a little bit of a busy slide, but what I would recommend is, I'll leave this up here for a couple of minutes, contact John Armstrong or Travis or Changeway and talk to them about, they'll do a demo for you, okay, right online. You don't have to leave your office. They'll do a demo for you and actually show you how all this stuff works. Pretty cool stuff. We spend a lot of time with them just to go through every single detail, and we like it. We like what they're doing, and we think it's going to really help our clients a lot. So give them a call and see what if they can help you with this whole thing. Sorry. This is just a little bit blurb on me and my background. You can kind of get this off of LinkedIn, so I'll have to kind of move on. And a couple of books I've authored. I'm thinking about my next book. Not sure what it's going to be yet, but anyway, that's it. Okay, so there's my contact details. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, email me, call me, text me, whatever. Be happy to talk to you, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm going to stop it now and just open. I won't stop the video, but I'm going to stop the sharing, and I'm going to open this up to some questions. Okay, hang on if I can figure out how to do this. Okay, are there any questions? I think we'll probably have to unmute you somehow, but are there any questions?
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes.
Charlie here. I work at APM Terminals, Elizabeth in New Jersey, one of the big container terminals in the Northeast. I reached out to you like a long time ago, but anyway, I love your focus on the processes, something we're trying to really ingrain in the way that we work here. And one of the challenges we've found is, finding a system or a platform that's not so tedious. So I sort of came into the business and the team's like, are you serious? Like what it takes us to upload a process and all these swim lanes and all that sort of stuff can take like hours. It's actually, the voice of the customers telling us like they hate it. Like any tips on different systems that might, be something that we could, look into improving our process landscape so that we can sort of, have all of our processes linked to some sort of key performance indicators. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure what the question is, because when you say systems, what kind of processes are you referring to, Charlie?
So basically, when a truck comes into a terminal with a container on it, how do we flow it through so that the export gets on the ship, and the same with imports out of the terminal on a truck or on a rail. But just, there's, we must have 500 plus processes that we need to run this place, linked with the labor.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And just like the platform for sort of like storing that, we've found can be like, and, we're part of a global company, the Maersk Group, it's just, I don't know, we're just hearing some feedback that
Well,
everyone.
what would good look like to you if you were to wave a magic wand? What would you say would be different?
It's a good question. Maybe just something that, it's very easy to, upload something. The team tells us it's like, it takes them hours, sometimes 3 hours to upload, what they all sort of collaboratively sit down and say, right, this is the safest, fastest, most customer friendly way to do something, and actually get that into a system so that we can, I don't know, maybe.
Okay, so what I think, the first thing you have to do is start out with the objective, right? So if it is all about reducing the amount of hours, and maybe that's a productivity measure, if it's about lead time in terms of how long it takes to get a load on the boat or whatever it is, you first have to start with the objective in mind, right? And then think to yourself, okay, well, the last thing I want to do is default to a software program, okay? Not to say that you would not do that, but a lot of times people knee-jerk reaction, go out and buy software without really thinking through what the process should be to begin with. So what they do is they adopt a software program on a chaotic process that has all kinds of waste. So the first thing to do is take the waste out of the process, okay, and then start thinking about, well, if automation makes sense, go ahead and do that. But do not think that the holy grail is going to be a software program, because it won't be. Matter of fact, you'll complicate that even more if you just throw more software at it, okay? And by the way, the software salesman won't tell you that, okay, because they'll tell you the opposite. But I had a CEO one time tell me, a CFO, how great his ERP system was going to do and how it was going to solve all his problems, right? So all I said to him was, then go out and buy 2 of them, geez, go ahead, buy 2. If that good, buy 3, for crying out loud. It's not going to solve your problems. You've got to take. I convinced the CEO of a client one time, it was a $3 billion company. They were putting in an ERP, they were putting in SAP, right? They had chaotic processes all over the place, right? And I convinced them to hold off on the implementation for 18 months while we went in and looked at their critical processes and took out as much waste. Matter of fact, Clem Confessori, who's on the call, worked with me on this one. And we took a lot of waste out and then put in the process. We saved them $80 million of ERP implementation. Because what happens is when they quote you on this thing, they'll say, okay, it's going to cost you 50 million. And sooner or later, you're writing a check for 120, okay, because of all the different changes and complications. It happens all the time. So the SAP team was furious with me, right? And then afterwards, they came back and said, Mark, we apologize. You were right. And I'll give you one example. They had roughly 26 distribution centers in North America. When we got down with it and really thought it through from a lean and a strategic perspective, they only ended up with 11. And by the way, their customer service was better. The inventories were better. The turns were better. Everything was better, right? And so they would have been implementing SAP into 26 different sites, and they only had to do it for 11. Okay, so before, I don't even want to get into which software is the best software, because you may not be at the position to even think about that yet if you haven't done the fundamentals.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I mean, it's just, we're so focused on, going to Gemba and, taking out our processes and doing process confirmations. And, you spoke about strategy deployment pitfalls and that manual administration. So just hearing from the team going, shit, it takes me this long to put it in the system. Then you want me to go in Gemba and do a process confirmation. Takes us a pile of time to get that done. It's sort of like, okay, we've got to, but anyway, I'll have a chat to the guys at Changeway.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is don't let your existing system be your master, okay? It should work for you. If you're doing a lot of things just to satisfy the system and it doesn't provide you any business benefit, then you got to really ask yourself, well, why are we doing it to begin with? Because
Exactly.
a lot of times we try to improve a suboptimal process or a process that we shouldn't be doing at all, right? And so we spend a lot of time trying to optimize in that regard, but what ends up really happening is we shouldn't be doing that to begin with, right? So don't let the system become your master. Make it work for you,
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Good to hear from you. Anybody else?
Hey, Mark.
Oh, Wilson.
Yes, thanks for sharing this with us. It's been very good information. I posed a question and Jeff just answered, sent me a message already, but I've been wondering about the Kaizen events, how long your experience should take from the beginning to the end. Jeff pointed out that that should take like 3 days to do the complete solution. There are some scenarios that are like more complex in the sense that we might follow up with KPIs or some statistics to validate that the process is in control now. So, but also at the same time, we're looking at how to bring the Kaizen culture to the shop floor where they are not that they don't handle that well. They know all the statistic tools. So what would be your recommendation on when you start a Kaizen event? How long should it take to be complete?
Oh, how long are you going to live? I mean, there's a reason why I call my business Lean Horizons, because if you walk to a horizon and you reach that point, what do you see? Another horizon, right? It's ongoing, it's forever, it's a journey. So there's no real magic answer. By the way, talk about Kaizen events. You want to talk about number of days and all that stuff. The 5-day Kaizen event is because consultants like to book that way, okay? Not all Kaizen events take 5 days, okay? Some take a day, some take an hour, okay? Depending on what it is, all right? And so don't get hung up on how many, you got to really think through, there's a certain amount of time that some of the tools may take, but I'll tell you right now, I mean, creating a cell, for example, we typically would create a cell and put the first pass standard work in place, move equipment and everything else. But we got really good at it. We were very mature at it. And we had all the maintenance and everything set up to do that. Sometimes that was done in 5 days, but depending on the complexity of what you're doing and what the scope is, it all depends. And there's no magic answer to say it's got to be 3 days, 5 days, 10 days. You may have to come back at it several times. Then you got to think about, okay, once I get the first pass improvements in place, is there another priority I need to go after that's more critical than the one I just worked on, right? And maybe that one's going to run okay for a while until it raises its head. So there's no magic answer on this at all. But just keep in mind that the 5-day Kaizen event is a notion. I remember sitting down with Mr. Iwata from Shingijutsu, and who I loved, and he was a great mentor of mine. And he would sit down with the schedule for the whole year. And he said, DeLuzio-san, you have to fill out the schedule for Danaher for the whole year. And I said, Iwata-san, I said, you teach us just in time. This is batch. And he said to me, DeLuzio-san, you learn too well. Now give me the schedule. So anyway, but they booked all 5-day events. So, and that's just how they kind of worked, and we didn't fight them on that really, but at the end of the day, if it's a 3-day event, we're going to do it in 3 days. We're going to do it in 5 days, just because we want 2 more days of billing. That's not right. That's not the right way to look at it. And so there's no real magic answer to what you're asking. You have to use your judgment in terms of what you think the right thing to do is, and every situation, situation is different. Yeah.
Can I add 2 points to that, Mark?
Sure.
So sorry I was late to your webinar. I had some internet problems, but
hey, Davey, how you doing?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Davey Thompson. Pleased to meet you, Mark. A couple of points. First of all, both they were talking to me in Japan about Kaizen. The first point is that your Kaizen doesn't start on day 1. People ask that question all the time about, is it a 2-day Kaizen, a 5-day Kaizen, a 3? Your preparation and you're in the plan, do, check, action cycle starts before you decide you're going to do a Kaizen event. You're already on the ground, having a look at the situation and visualizing what the end game is going to look like. Then you create your team, and then you say, this is going to take 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, whatever. And as Mark's just alluded to, you don't bite off more than you can chew. But the corollary to that is, once you've done your Kaizen, there's not a list of 100 things that needs to be done over the next 6 to 8 weeks, because you won't do them. And that's backward plan, do, check, action. All the emphasis should be on the plan side. How many people am I going to need, for how long, what area, what is this going to look like at the end of it? And at the end of your Kaizen activity, there should be half a dozen things that couldn't be fixed and couldn't be foreseen at the beginning, which maybe cropped up during the activity, that you give yourself a maximum of a couple of weeks or whatever the lead time for the things maybe you have to order is to get that activity done and dusted. But as Mark says, there's no secret sauce. When we did this, and we brought Kaizen to Europe in 1987, 88, through Nissan, it is a term that has never been used in the UK, never been used in Europe to the best of understanding. And we made it a Kaizen activity 10 days. We were taught 2 in Japan. We made it 10 to give the Western thinking a weekend of downtime to move machines around and whatever. So it was easy. Now, in Japan, as Mark's just alluded to, we would be moving things at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's the speed and the cadence and the gearing up the Japanese management bring to the Kaizen process. Now, this was completely new to the UK. So we said, we're going to make it 10 days. And then over a couple of 2 or 3 years, we made it 5 days, and then it was 2 days. Until when I left Nissan in 1994, we were down to a 2-hour Kaizen, and I believe it's even less now. There's a guy on the call that I used to work beside, John Kitching, one of the plants that we worked in together in my last job, we were on 15-minute Kaizens. So 15 minutes, because if you think small, you'll fix it small. You think big, then it's going to be a war and peace, and the solution will take forever to implement. So, the Japanese said to me once, and I hope you can see this on the screens, in the West, you plan this to do that, and in Japan, we plan that to do this. And it's much, much easier, and it sticks first time. Hope that can answer some of the
That's and the other thing to think about is that the what is it called? It's called Parkinson's law, that the work fills the time available to do it. How many times have you had to get a report out by Friday, and it took you all week to do it, but when they said, hey, by the way, I need it on Monday, you only had a day to do it, you got it done, right? So just think about that. Apply our own lean thinking to our own process, right? That's what we're talking about. So, okay. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, hey, Mark, Bernier here in Texas. Grew up with Delphi Automotive, so background with Toyota training and even Danaher leaders. So what I've seen recently is working within a lot of companies with strategy deployment. So I want to ask you about the process of strategy deployment, less of the tool, less of the X matrix. I've seen a lot of companies still push down objectives, solutions already documented on an X matrix, fail to learn, and maybe also misuse the tool because stuff they're already doing, daily management type stuff. So companies that are already using the tool poorly, because they probably don't understand the process well, how do you bring them back in your experiences to align around what's needed? Maybe some coaching examples. What with the senior leadership team, I think it's more at the top level misunderstanding than it is at the mid-level people who are trying to pinch between executing and aligning to the objectives.
Well, like I said to you, Rob, earlier, I like to use real life analogies. So that's like teaching me. I used to play baseball, right? Which I know our friends in the UK call rounders. They call it rounders, right? And my golf swing is a baseball swing, right? So good luck with changing my swing, right? I've been trying to do that now for how many years? And which is why I'm doing consulting, because I'm not going to be on the PGA Tour tomorrow. So anyway, so it's hard sometimes to change somebody's golf swing, right? And it's the same thing here. But I'll go back to this, okay? The first, everybody says, okay, we're going to do lean. It's strategy and employment is part of that, but it applies to lean in general, right? If you do not, if leadership does not understand the principles of what we're trying to do, then good luck with trying to change that, because it's got to start with there. It's got to start with the principles, and the principles have to be not only understood intellectually. You have to actually change your behavior in accordance with those principles, right? So if that's not there, okay, and it's not, and again, every one of these things that we do in lean, including strategy deployment, has its set of principles, right? One of them being, what you just mentioned, don't confuse daily management with well, first you got to know what daily management is before you can differentiate, right? And you have to understand what breakthrough is and all that. You have to understand the complexion of your strategy deployment. You know, is it an operational play right now, or is it a growth play, or is it a hybrid like we talked about, right? So understanding the complexion. So all these things start with principles. And normally when you see what you're talking about, Rob, it's because the leadership does not get the principle. Even though they'll tell you they do, they don't get the principles. And I always was one that said, watch what they do, not what they say, right? And so if you, and then you got a little bit tougher job there too, because now you have to undo their golf swing. You have to undo their golf swing to get them to move in a new direction, right? And sometimes that's hard because it's not only them either, right? It's everybody else who's been doing that process that way for a number of years. So now you got to kind of recalibrate the whole organization. It's a lot harder, believe it or not, than it is starting out. There's no magic answer to that, but you got to start with the principles in good facilitation and teaching of these concepts so that they're held accountable to make sure they don't violate that. You know, this is no different. Oh, by the way, I didn't say this at the beginning, but strategy deployment is probably the most messed up thing in our field, right? More so than even standard work. And that's kind of messed up itself. And which is why I did the standard work thing a couple months ago. So it's up on YouTube, by the way, if you want to see it. But for some reason, and this happened to me at Danaher too, when we were putting this in, for some reason, strategy deployment has a sign on it that says, beat me, use me, abuse me. Everybody wants to change it before they understand the principles. It happens all the time. And it's something about this particular process that is more so than any other. They just want to change it without first understanding the nuances. And I didn't talk a lot about the nuances today because there's a lot of them, but understanding how this works, they automatically out of the box want to change it. Okay. And when that happens, forget it. Okay. Because I can tell you right now, 999 times out of 1,000, they're going to guess the wrong answer. All right. It happened to me at Danaher with some senior executives who thought, you know, some of these guys that I worked with thought they were the smartest guys in the room, and they knew all, right? And they would end up, you know, making it. Matter of fact, goal deployment is a good example of that, right? So like I said, you got to start with the principles. Then you have to be accountable, because like in any process, what are you using to detect an abnormality from the standard? It's the same thing with strategy deployment, right? So that's how you got to think about it. You've got a set of principles and concepts that are written down. The process is spelled out. And when you violate that, it's got to be called to attention, just like it would be if you're supposed to do one piece flow and you're going to start batching in the cell. You should be able to see that, right? So that's my answer. There's no specific thing I could give you here, but I don't know if that helps or not, but it does in fact start with the principles in terms of what are you really trying to do with this thing? What's the objective of strategy deployment? Why are you doing it? And many times when you start looking at the gory details of how they use the process, it doesn't marry up to the answer to that question. So.
Yeah, that's my experience. Very accurate too at that level, is they just want to go do with impatience and not set the vision and strategy of where they're trying to get to in 3 to 5 years.
Well, it's a lot of things too. You know, it's like once you get into a routine, you don't even think about doing it anymore because you're just doing it because you're supposed to do it. You know, and nobody. You know, it takes sometimes some time to get out of the fire and take a step back and say to yourself, well, "What are we doing here?" Especially if you're not getting the results. Okay, I see Clem got a.
Yeah. What the only thought that I would add to this, I've observed people that are addicted, not just chemical addictions, by the way, but people are addicted to doing things the way they always did them. And addicts don't change until they experience a significant emotional event. In the case of Jakebrake, a major customer saying, cut the price 30%. That was the significant emotional event. And that allowed them to consider and to work on making a major change. It wasn't a discussion whether they ought to or not. So when you talk about the leader who doesn't seem to be getting off the dime on this, often they haven't experienced a significant emotional event and don't see one coming. If And that may be the place to start. What is it that's coming at us? Something they may not have seen yet, because once they face that, they just keep doing everything the way we always did. Now, I just got the little flash that my connection is unstable, so I don't know if any of that got across.
Yeah, you are breaking up, Clem, quite a bit. You are breaking up.
I'm sorry.
Any other questions we can handle? Hey, Ricardo,
Mark, it was
up
just
on the top of my screen every time I do a webinar. Ricardo is up on top all the time. What's going on with you?
Mark, it was just in addition to, I've lost sight of who it was that asked that question, so my apologies. But
It was Rob Grenier.
Hi, Rob. One of the things that I've been asked this twice in the training out and development of strategy deployment with clients in the past, and I was asked the question by one client in November: can you come in? Can you take us through how can we process it is that will fit our business? We really want to be starting to do this strategy deployment stuff that everyone's talking about. I said, yeah, next year. And said, what the hell are you talking about next year? We want to get going for the year that's coming up. I said, but yeah, but it's November. And it was a fairly large company. And the time it takes you to go through that process of catch ball and to really understand what are the gaps, back to Mark's point about what are my abnormalities, what's my gaps from standard, what am I trying to do with my business, what's my vision, what do I want to try and create? Are you really going to try and get through all of that with the first line, the guys who are not doing the daily management in a 6-week period, so that by 1st of January, you're good to go? Really? Don't think so. So the compelling argument I had with them was, you need to start this process a lot earlier on. It's back to plan, do, check, action. The time you put into the P makes the D, the C, and the A a lot easier. It's no different, but I don't know if it answers the question, Rob, but I've had it where people who pay lip service to that process, and I've seen a few CEOs, C-suite people who think this is just a tool out the box. It's a better way of me setting objectives for next year than the old way, but don't really give it the time. You're still fighting a losing battle with these guys, but we need to start that process of education that says, look, there is a process that takes some time here. We need to maybe think about back to the values and the principles that Mark's just mentioned, and actually reinvigorate it and re-educate the people who are making the decision in the first place. Otherwise, they're going to perpetuate this. They're going to be starting. It's the halfway house between the managing director sitting down on Christmas Eve and saying, this is what we're going to do next year, which is zero time management by objectives and diktat. And then the other end is, let's give people a lot of time to really chew this over so that we hit the ground running on the 1st of Jan, or whenever your period begins, with a real clear understanding and line of sight from shop floor to boardroom about what the hell we're trying to achieve this year. If you don't get that, then you're in this halfway house doldrums, limbo area where you're really going to try and go to make the best of it in that first year, and you're down to half a dozen good guys really trying to handball that system through, so at least you get a decent start on the 1st of January. I don't know if that helps.
Anybody else?
I can back you up on that as well, Davey. In one of the multinationals that I worked in, we did have the strategy deployment and been using it for a long, long time. And we had another company sort of like took over us and merged. And that was their first time they'd ever seen it. And it took them a good 18 months to get their heads around it and understand it and start to apply it. So it does take time.
Yeah.
John, hey, really good seeing you there. By the way, if you guys aren't following John on LinkedIn, you should listen to some of the things that he posts. He posts some pretty good stuff.
Thank you, Mark.
Good seeing you, John. Hey, John, you're right. I should have mentioned that earlier, that when you first start this process, it does take about 18 months. You said, it's funny you said that. That's been my experience too. It takes about 18 months to get decent at it, and you'll make a lot of mistakes. And it's a new, put it this way, you will not have really mastered this process until you don't think about it as something extra that you're doing. Okay. If it's integrated into the fabric of how you lead and how you run your business. Okay. Now, I said to you earlier, Danaher's been doing this for 30 years. Danaher, I'm going to use my friend Davey Thompson's words, is a no bullshito company. Okay. Okay. They do not tolerate any kind of stuff that they don't think is wasteful. They've been using this process for 30 years. Okay. After I put it in the early 90s. And I'm really happy to see that, but that's testament to me anyway, from the people that I know that run that, you know, and again, Stephen Mitch Rails and the leadership team there, you know, they see value in this, but it does take time to get good at this, right? And it's hard to do. It's a lot of work, just like everything else in lean, but it's worth doing. But you got to put time in. You know, this kind of stuff, any kind of transformation is not a 9-to-5 endeavor. It's not a Monday through Friday endeavor. Everybody wants to cut out at 4 o'clock on a Kaizen. When you start seeing that happen, you can pretty much predict that it's not going to work, right? So they're gonna peter out because they're not committed, you know. So, but thanks, John, for your input. Appreciate it. Good seeing you. Anybody else? Okay. Well.
Hey, Mark. Any advice
Ricardo.
on how? Hi. Any advice on how to deploy strategy on these fast-paced companies, such as the e-commerce companies that are running really fast and focusing on just executing before even implementing or designing their own processes? How to start deploying a robust strategy for these companies, mostly the startups?
Well, okay. Well, you know, I think when you look at even like an acquisition that we would acquire a new company that's, you know, one of the reasons we bought them was probably because they were not well run and they were chaotic to begin with, right? And one of the things you're always going to hear is you're going to hear people tell you, Ricardo, that I actually had people tell me, we got to clean up our problems first before we start lean. Okay. And that's like telling your doctor, I'm not going to take your medicine until I get better, right? And so if they're in such a, you know, a frenetic environment where all they're doing is, you know, going crazy, just trying to swat. Remember, I don't know if you guys know, in foreign countries, here in the US, we have something called whack-a-mole. You know what that is? It's a carnival game, and you take the big hammer, and they got all these different holes in this table, and a mole will come up and you're supposed to whack it. And then it will go down, another one will pop up and you whack it, and another one, right? And you keep playing whack-a-mole. And the whole idea is within a given period of time, 2 minutes or whatever, how many moles can you hit, right? Well, you can only do that for so long because after a while your arm gets tired, right? And all of a sudden you start losing. And so sooner or later, if they're treading water right now in these new companies, okay, but nobody's paying attention to creating sustainable processes to do what they do now, maybe. And again, I have a whole presentation on a process. I'd be happy to send it to you guys. The process is, if it's not documented and it's not defined, I almost go as far as saying, if you can't email me your process, you can't call it a process, right? It's not a process, right? So if all this is being done by tribal knowledge and just brute force, it's not a sustainable thing. Just like with the whack-a-mole, your arm's going to get tired, and sooner or later, your score is going to go down. All right, maybe I hit 20 in a minute. Now, next time it's going to be 15. That's going to be 12, and sooner or later you're going to lose. So you've got to just consciously make the time and organize around this. Now, this is one of those deals where when people ask these questions, they're looking for a magic formula. And it's like, well, then you're asking me how you should do your job as a leader and a manager. Okay. So you've got to take the time to actually look at, on a priority basis, what are the key enabling processes that you spend most of your time on and have the most hectic, you know, and put those processes in place using the tools that we talked about, right? Whether it's value stream mapping, standard work, whatever it may be, process mapping. And actually spend a certain amount of time working on the business, not in the business, right? And that's, you know, there's no magic answer to it. So
can I throw something in, Mark?
Sure.
Hi, Ricardo. Great question. And so sometimes the lens by which we look at things is very different, you know, for different industries. So it's a cracking question about which, for something that is intellect and creativity type based projects. And there's a word that everybody's kicking around at the moment. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll understand my views on fads and fad labeling. But the word is Scrum, and to be a Scrum master. So the technique of mini project management of Scrum and software development and whatever, and setting 30-day goals to get things done and to look at. There is a process out there. I mean, I'm not decrying it for one second. 100% agree with it. If that is the sale of your business and you're not actually manufacturing products, which have got a design phase, a trialing phase, a production phase, and then a run-out phase. And if your idea is only valid for 2 months, then you have to think of something else. It's an entirely different type of process for creating value and altering your value offering. Nonetheless, that still hangs under a strong policy deployment or strategy deployment process. There's no reason why when you get to the second iteration of we call it driving the bus, when you're turning your X matrix round to work out what the hell you're doing, that the improvement plans and stuff can't embrace something like a scrum strategy where bunches of guys come together from all over the world, virtually or whatever, and generate that product. It could be in the SD process, you're saying we need to do that 50 to 100 times a year. The how you do it is articulated through that mini project management tool. Does that make a kind of sense? The two can go hand in glove. Fast paced from idea to concept to idea evaporating. Even processes and products of that nature, the production of which can still be guided by Hoshin Kanri policy deployment at the top level.
I agree, Dave and Mark. Thank you for their inputs. And in talking about a management approach to, let's say, to the CEO, who is you that have all the experience dealing with these guys, how should I apply? How should I approach to them and tell them, we need to take the time to do it, even to start like this 18 months approach or the Scrum approach, how to convince this guy. Again, I talked, Mark, on the last webinar about how to convince the top level management on how to convince them, but how to tell them you need to do this, because otherwise you will continue suffering on bad quality and customers unhappy and et cetera, et cetera. So how to convince them, because it's their company, but they have already in place, all these big marketing efforts and all these, sportsmen being their ambassadors and commercials everywhere, but they are still delivering bad quality things. How do you convince them that they need to change their approach?
The first, sorry, Mark, if I can I'll field that one just for 2 seconds. The very first thing I would ask a CEO of that nature, when you're saying that there are failings in place, is how happy are you with your goal deployment, whatever structure he has in place? How happy are you that the way that you get everybody in the boat to be pulling on the oars at the same time? How happy are you with that process, that 2020's results are going to be even better in 2021? And if he turns to you and says, well, holy geez, we were trying to do, by the time everyone knew what was happening, it was March. And then we were trying to compress 12 months worth of effort into 9 months, whether it be quality, whether it be service level, whether it be operational profit, whatever you want to call it. And how I've used this in the past, I've gone back and said, look, everybody plays catch up. Everybody puts a humongous amount of effort in at the end of the year to try and make up for the lost time at the beginning of this, which is all too conveniently forgotten. So the conversation and the argument I go back to CEOs with is, look, can we just start that dialogue 3 months earlier so that we get a clean start? We rather than start the process and the engine starts and splutters into life in March, wouldn't it be nicer if we just started that process back in October? So you've got a full 12 months and we can kick it back and forth. We get true line of sight. It's not a cascade down from the top of goals that may or may not be even achievable. That we've actually undertaken a process by which you and I, Ricardo, we'll shuffle back and forth on it to make sure we really truly understand what needs to be happening. And then we start that in the 1st of January. Doesn't that sound like a much nicer world, Mr. CEO, than me coming to you at the end of the year saying, I need more resource, or we're going to be late, or I'm really sorry. You know, that's how I've done it in the past, because you're dead right. We are fighting a world where if you've been in an MBO type environment, the managing director tells you what's going to happen, and by the time you've got your head around how the hell am I going to achieve this, not only has the clock started, but my reward mechanism, my appraisal system, everything that's making me look good or bad, that's clicked in as well. And I'm now trying to play catch up, not catch ball, catch up. And I've only got 9 months to do what I should have been doing in 12 months. And it's a horrible situation for everybody. And I guarantee you, the CEO is sitting back thinking, this is no way to run a business. This doesn't happen. This is not. I'm sick of telling you every 3 months, Ricardo, you need to try harder. Yeah. Well, if you asked me maybe in October last year, we could have kicked this around and get everybody engaged. So,
Ricardo, I think the other thing is, that all makes sense, but you got to realize something. You first have to determine all that stuff that Davey said, super, except you've got to make the call as to whether or not your CEO can be told anything. Okay. And if they can't, everything that Davey said, forget. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And most CEOs they'll tell you they want to be told. They tell you, you can come to me and tell me that I have no clothes on. Right. But they don't really feel that way. And that's not a hit on CEOs. It's just who they are. And so the next step then would be for you have to actually show them. Okay. You can't tell them what they got to do. You have to show them, which means that you and a cohort of people have to do something that's meaningful so that they can look at that. And by the way, that's exactly how Jake Break started, because the Rails brothers and George Sherman and Larry Culp, although they would not had, George, they would not have came to me and said, hey, do for Danaher what you guys did for Jake Break. Now, luckily enough, we had Art Byrne and George Konensaker, who were visionaries, right? And they knew. And matter of fact, like I told you before, Jake Break was we were going out of business. We really were. We couldn't screw it up anymore. Okay. There's no way we could have tried to screw it up. It was so low on the totem pole, we couldn't go any lower. So anything we did would have been better, but we did some really great stuff. But Jake Break was the catalyst for DBS, because we showed them it could work. And when George came to me and he said, do for Danaher what you guys did for Jake Break. Okay. So sometimes you got to take the bull by the horns and not wait for permission, but go do something. Okay. And then show them a model that works and show them the delta, to Davey's point, on the data. Okay. That, because some CEOs you just can't tell. You can't, everything that Davey said, I know CEOs right now would have shut them off in 2 seconds. Okay. Because they're not wired that way. So you got to determine who your leadership is. Okay. And so in some of the cases, they would have been very open to what Davey had to say. You've got to understand the personality of your leadership and before you decide on an approach. That's why it's really hard to answer your question. So.
Can I just jump in here, Mark?
Sure, John.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned, Ricardo, was that you had quality problems. So have you costed the cost of poor quality there? Because in one company that I did that, because the management, again, were reluctant, but then when I showed them the data and it was over in a 9-month period of around about 380,000 that they'd lost, then, that makes a difference, because then they can see, how much that is costing them. And obviously that's a conservative amount. There was obviously more than that. So that may be an approach that you can have to have that discussion.
Hey, John, I'm curious, John. Do you happen to recall what the percentage of revenues that cost of poor quality was?
Let's think it, because it's a while back.
No, it's okay. I was just.
No, it's probably around, because it probably cost them around about the 30-odd%.
Okay, yeah, because my numbers are usually in the 24% range. when you really do the math on that one, right? And I'm working with a client right now. They said that the cost of poor quality is 0.38% of sales. And I said, what? And only of the 90 some odd categories that we consider in that equation, they were only counting 4. Okay, so it usually is up around the 25 or so, give or take, percent range of revenue, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a good suggestion.
It is, yeah.
But now, you know, a lot of companies aren't equipped to calculate that because they don't have the accounting systems to capture all that stuff. So you know, there's a lot of different ways you can think about this. But first, I still go back to say, you really got to know the nature of who you're talking to and who you're trying to convince. And then you have to figure out, you know, what do you do from there? So anyway, anybody else on any other questions?
Well, if nobody talks, based on this, and let's say I take the bull by the horns and do the things before asking for permission and calculating all the costs of wrong quality, and at the same time I need to do the work that the CEO asked me to do. So, how, in your experience, how many times or how much extra effort you need to put on this, because you need to comply with the things they are asking you to do, and on the other hand, do the things to prove that it makes sense to work on it.
Well, I think the answer to your question about how much extra effort, the answer to me would be a lot.
Yep.
Remember I said earlier, transformations aren't 9 to 5 proposition, and they're not a Monday through Friday proposition. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to hide that at all and say it's easy. It's not. It's worth it, but it's also hard work. So, and that's what a lot of people don't want to commit to. Like I talked to one potential client, and they have 50 sites around the world. Okay. Yeah, we got pretty heavily into Kaizen. We've done 8 Kaizens in the last 8 months. So I'm sitting there saying, okay, well, you know, geez, 8 Kaizens. Okay, well, you know, that's 1 a month for the last 8 months. That's not bad for, you know, it's not great, but it's not bad. And by the way, there's no number that you need to hit in terms of how many Kaizens. I could tell you if it's too low, you know, because if you go to gym once a month, you want to be Mr. Universe, guess what? That's not going to work. But then I found out it was 8 across all 50 sites. The whole company did 8 in 8 months for 50 sites. Well, guess what? Then you're sitting there saying, well, geez, we didn't see the results. Yeah. I only went to the gym once every month and lifted weights, and I didn't make the cut to be in Mr. Universe. Okay. There's a reason for that. Okay. So you got to put the time and effort into it. There's no other way to think about it, but you just got to put the time and effort into it. So
I agree.
Anybody else?
Yeah, hi Mark. It's Ruben. I'm one of the younger guys, but we're struggling in our own company in Europe, all over. And to paint the picture a bit black and white, but what I'm hearing from you guys basically is from some clients you just have to walk away. Because we had some customers, and one that pops to mind was one of our biggest failures was a multinational, second biggest multinational in fast-moving consumer goods, and it was basically an epic failure. We worked all around Europe, got unions going, got the factories going, and basically when we went to headquarters, the answer we got from the board of directors was, yeah, we need more project managers, and that's where it stopped. So they were just chasing bottom line, chasing their KPIs, chasing their organic growth. But we never got any traction from that leadership. They were completely oblivious. They had their ceremonies, they had their organizational master plan, which was their word for strategy deployment, but it was simply impossible to get these guys to connect with the operational level. We simply hit a rock ceiling. It wasn't even a glass ceiling, it was bloody concrete. And the only way we got was logistics worked with us, middle management worked with us, but as soon as you reached the top 2 levels of directors, they were bloody oblivious. They only looked at their only functional levels, and they completely ignored us. I mean, every time we went there on the recommendation, we got bogged down saying, this is above your pay grade, start fixing something in logistics, start working on supply chain, start fixing on sales, but we never got them to think with us. So it's a message basically, forget those customers. Tell them, look, it's unfortunate you have 10,000 people working their ass off, but sorry, you fuckers are incompetent. It's never going to work because your leadership is inept.
Do I take it that you're in the consulting business?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, excuse me. Sorry about that. I have fired clients before. Most of the time when I fired a client, it was because of values, not because incompetence, right? And so the question you got to ask yourself is if you have the right values, then, but you're technically incorrect in terms of what you're doing, that's a heck of a lot better proposition than if you have the bad values, okay? Because values are kind of part of people's DNA, right? And it's part of their fabric of who they are. And I don't know, everybody says they can change those, but, and I'm not saying people can't improve, don't get me wrong, but sometimes when the values aren't there, let's say it's a level of disrespect. And it sounds to me like in some cases that could be that case in your situation. Then maybe it is time to walk away, because I have a saying. See, one of the things about me, and I don't have to do this for the money. Okay, I can retire tomorrow if I wanted to, but I do it because I really do want to help clients, right? But when it gets to a point where they're wasting their money and I'm wasting my time, then I say forget it. Okay, because there's only so much you can do. And, you know, or maybe I was just in the wrong guy to do it. Maybe it was my personality that did not convince or find a way to get that CEO to make the change, right? The other thing you got to think about too is, and I've seen this a lot, is that some of these guys in these senior leadership positions have really good bonus plans and really good, you know, and quite frankly, some really mediocre goals to hit. And they don't want to screw with that. They've got they're kind of set, you know, they've got their lifestyle. They got the plans in place to hit the numbers that the board wants them to hit. And it's nowhere by all means breakthrough, but what ends up happening is they're not really thinking, and there's one client I did fire in this regard. They're not thinking about the wake that they're going to leave behind them when they retire. They're going to leave chaos behind. Well, they're already in chaos, and this one company I'm talking about was unbelievably profitable. Danaher-esque results, but the operations were abysmal, okay? And people, one of the company presidents actually said, we can't have one of my division presidents work on this. He's already working 75 hours a week. Okay, we can't do lean, okay? And I said, well, okay, so you got a recruiter working on his position? What do you mean? I said, he's going to quit. He's going to resign. He's going to burn out. If you're going to sit there saying he can't do lean because he's working 75, doesn't even the fact that he's working 75 hours a week at all affect you? I mean, you know, like Ono said, no problem is problem, right? They don't see that as a problem. And that wasn't the only disrespect that they had on the employees. Okay, so at that point in time, you got to kind of say, and I did at this point. I said, okay, we're done. I can't help you anymore. And I was making a lot of money with those guys, and it wasn't about the money. Okay, it was about the fact that I have to look at myself in the mirror right in the morning, and I have to say, you know, am I doing this? Am I just doing this to suck out a bunch of billing from this guy where I know it's not going to help him? No, if I really know I'm the wrong guy to help him, I'll walk away. So that's what you got to kind of determine.
Yeah, because it's a situation we get across quite often, that we move into these companies. They have this really understaffed continuous improvement teams that have to start going. We're talking 1,000 staff units, and they have 5 people doing continuous improvement next to the 2 guys doing internal audits, and you're just running knackered. You're desperately trying to get some people to reinforce it. And sure, grassroots, you can get it going because the people on the floor, they feel the pain. They go into the Kaizen. But then you try to get above and you hit that wall again. It's just all the KPI, bloody watermelons. All the KPIs are green. You go to the floor, it's all bloody red, but the KPIs are all
Yeah,
green.
so there's not a hookup, and by the way, that does happen in strategy deployment where your second levels are all green and your top levels are red, right? So I didn't mention that, but that's one of the things we talk about when we do this. But I'll tell you another thing too is that, Ruben, that a lot of these leaders say, okay, I just hired Davey Thompson. He's going to do lean for us. Wow, wrong answer. Because if you think about, even going back to the Bible, right? You think about the whole CI type of support within a company, right? Internal support. They're staff, they're not line, right? And by the way, one of the mistakes people make, and I will beyond this scope of this thing, but is that they give a staff person with a CI role a line job too. Yeah. Well, guess what? The line job sucks him in, man, and he doesn't get to do anything on staff. So I was always adamant that the staff had to stay staff. You can't say, oh yeah, Johnny is my head lean guy, and he also has engineering and quality. Bad, not good, right? So the staff is from the Bible, okay, believe it or not, where the shepherd who has his flock has a staff and he leans on that staff for support, right? That's what that means, right? But the accountability has to be with the line people, not with the CI people, okay? Now, don't be wrong, there's other ways to measure the CI people too, right? But the bottom line is, if the CEO is sitting there saying, I've got my lean team here, they're gonna do lean for me, then he's treating it like an IT project. He's not talking about culture, he's not talking about any of that stuff, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden right there, he's wrong, okay, in the principle, this is one of the principles, right? And they think about lean as like, hey, I can go out and hire Lean Horizons or your company or Davey or John Foster. We can go hire these guys. And then all of a sudden, it's like a refrigerator, right? I bought a refrigerator, I bring it home, I plug it in, and 30 minutes later, I have cold drinks. That's as easy as it is. I didn't have to do anything. As a matter of fact, the delivery guys delivered my refrigerator. They plugged it in for me. I didn't have to do a thing. Maybe just put warm drinks in there. And then all of a sudden I got cold drinks and everything's fine. That's done. We're done. Yeah. That's what they think about this. When they think about, whenever they use the words program, or when they use the words, or if they think about like, I got my lean team here is going to do lean for me. Okay. Yeah. I'll correct the CEO like right away and say, no, you're the head lean guy. If you don't think about it that way, if you don't see yourself as the head lean guy, then the game's over. Okay.
Yeah. If it's bolted on, Mark, if it's a bolt-on program, it's the very first thing to be unbolted when the shit hits the fan.
Oh my God.
Totally.
Yeah. No kidding. And
Ruben's point, even people who have come from grassroots and worked their way up through an organization, there's almost like a cloud cover at 30,000 feet. They understand it till they hit 30,000 feet, and then they fly through the turbulence of the cloud to get to the C-suite or the first or the second tier. And by the time they've got in there, they can't see land anymore. They can't see CI anymore. Lean or whatever the hell you want to call it. I've seen a selfishness actually take over when people bust through that membrane. Up to this cloud cover, it's all about us. After the cloud cover, it's all about me. And there's an old saying, you're kind of alluding to it very politely at the beginning, Ruben. You can't polish a turd. If you don't feel you're going to make a difference in that, you've got to just walk away and preserve your dignity. Because what we don't want to be doing is attaching ourselves to crash and burn tactics here.
Well, Ruben, I think what you really got to do though is you have to assess, first of all, are the values there? Okay. And what I mean by that is, okay, they may not know they're disrespecting people. And if you bring it to their attention, are they open to say, oh, geez, I didn't think about it that way, right? But two is, and by the way, sometimes these things show up in little ways, right? Like always coming late to meetings, picking up a phone right in the middle of a meeting while you're talking to the guy, having a computer on while you're giving a presentation. Little things like that all mean bigger things, right? Just like crime, when you see the little crime going on, those are usually the guys that are doing the big crime, right? And so you got to look at that. But what you really got to assess, I think, is the probability of them changing. if you think there's hope there and you can help them. Now, again, like I said, it might be the fact that you're the wrong guy to do it. I'm not always the right guy to do it. So I have to kind of back off and let somebody, I have a client right now where that happened with. I was too strong, and one of my managing directors took the account over. He's doing wonderful with it, right? Different personalities click, right? Different chemistry.
Yeah, sure.
Some people don't like the Mark DeLuzio, Davey Thompson direct approach, like the softer approach, you know. So it could be that you're just not effective, not because you're a bad guy, it's just because you have a different DNA, right? Or it could be that, look, you got an assessment. I don't think they're going to change at all, and I just need to walk away, you know, because this is not good at all. You know? So
it's a balance we're trying to make a lot, because okay, we're a small company, we're a small mid-sized company, we got like 15 guys, so we're really a small player.
Yeah.
We got the advantage that we got the cash flow, so we can really pick our clients, but it's a difficult balance, because half of the time we have the feeling like we're not going to get this board to live those values. Sure, they preach them, sure they're all there every quarterly meeting or other slogans, but it's something else. If you feel it living on the floor, if you feel mid-management drawing to it, yeah, more often than not, we still try and give it a shot. But I must admit, it's very frustrating for the company and for us as external people to see that you got momentum, you got traction going, but at the top level, they're still looking quarterly numbers. You're doing lean, well, you got 2 quarters. Where's the payoff? You're talking about guys, we're doing values, you got training, you got at least 10 to 18 months to get this working, to get this. And they say, no, you got 3 people, that's it. And that's where you continuous improvement. It's really hard to get these people out of the project mindset. They see this thing like it's a 1980s IBM track, instead of saying it's culture, it's values. You got to live this. And of course, these are the guys that are stuck in their corner office and they never go on the floor.
Right.
But those corner offices, they're like bunkers. Try to get them out of them.
Hey, by the way, what country are you in? The Netherlands?
Yeah, I'm the Netherlands.
I just picked that up. I see. I've been around. I picked up your accent. But you know, I will say one last thing for you. As you signed on, Ruben, and you started off by saying you're one of the younger guys. You almost got muted, okay? Because that was. No, stay in touch, okay? I mean, if you ever want to talk about this, just give us a call, you know. And hey, I see Sam Jones out there. It's my buddy Sam. How you doing, Sam? Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, look, I think you guys got to figure out how Ricardo gets to the top of the screen every time I do a call. He's on top, you know. I don't know. I think he's got some kind of bug in my computer or something. I don't know, but good. Well, look, if there's no other question, we'll cut it out here. It went a little bit long, but that's okay. The whole thing was, you know, again, the topic on strategy deployment. Hopefully we can. Now, by the way, there are a lot of other methodologies that people use to do this. It's not always. This is the one that we started out with. We found to be very effective, and it really worked. And again, the whole idea of delineating between daily management. This is not an accounting process where everybody gets deployed goals that they all have to hit and it rolls up to some big number on top in that corner office that Ruben's talking about. It doesn't work that way, at least the way we did it. There may be other methodologies and other thought processes behind this, because if you read all the different Hoshin books that are out there, they're all different. They're all different. And we made a lot of mistakes with this. And then as we were making the mistakes, we ended up gravitating towards this particular approach, right? Am I going to sit here and say this is the best approach going? It was the one I'm used to and the one that really worked. And again, for 30 years, it's worked for Danaher, and you can see their results. However, I'd be foolish to tell you that it can't be improved. Okay, all right. So anything that we're doing today can be improved, right? And so that's something always to think about. And by the way, we have improved it. We have changed it quite a bit over the course of time. Well, one of the improvements, of course, is you know, how do we think about the administration of this thing? That's where Changeway came in, you know, and that's a big improvement, quite frankly, because moving from spreadsheets to that platform is a kind of a big deal, you know, and it's a good thing for the whole process. So, but we're going to sign off. If there's not any other questions, I really thank everybody for being here. You got our contact details, and good seeing you all. And Good meeting you, Ruben, and everybody else. Ricardo, seeing you again. John, finally good to see your face. You know, now I know you could talk because I just see your typed stuff on LinkedIn. Now you can, you really can talk.
Yeah, it's sometimes it gets away.
And Sam, hey, by the way, you guys, Sam and John and Davey, you guys got to get together. Davey's over in England. He won't admit that because he's Scottish, but he's in England. And
Missionary work, Mark. Missionary work. I brought civilization to these heathens. So
he married an English woman. Okay, so you know,
I needed an
can't wait.
interpreter. That's why.
So it's do as you're told, then, Davey.
I can't wait to meet her. I can't wait to meet her. Well, we got Sam over in Wales, and you know, so but anyway, really good talking to you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Okay,
Thanks very much.
Thanks for your input, David. Thanks for your input.
Adios a todos.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Be good. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.